part. So is that going to be a new class connected also to the certificate or something?
Yeah, I think my understanding, and they probably know better than me, they're going to connect it to the certificate. I think it's an additional course that they want to have as a part of the certificate. That's my understanding. So sorry, all of you were taking the certificate. It's gonna be more work. But I really don't know 100%. Maybe it's, you can choose and opt out. I'm not sure. So if you want to be sure, I think maybe call or ask Jay, the program manager for this course. He would know if you guys need his information. Do you guys have his information, by the way? Okay, let me get this for you.
What?
One moment, please.
It would be great to have an internship.
What? Hey, hold on, internship with me. You don't want to do an internship with me. I'm a slave driver. Okay, let me see here. Or you mean an internship with the course?
No, no, no. Well, I'm not sure with you. Like with someone who knows what's happening. That's it.
Yes, no, I will give you the email right now. So I'm gonna put the probably gonna hate me. How dare you share my email with students? Too late. Hold on. Let me just copy this. 1 minute, please. It didn't copy it. I don't know why it didn't copy it. Copy, I said. Copy. Paste. So this is Jay. He knows all the things of all the things. So you can email him and say, Jeanette told us about the summer course. Do we have to do this? Can we opt out? Can we be so lucky to do this? Any questions you have, just ask him. And say she didn't know, so she said we should call you. So there. Okay. So what I'll do now is I'm gonna go into my other screen. Do we see your PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes.
Now see the screen. That's just great. Let me move this awesome. I'm gonna move this here actually. So there. I'm gonna take all this away. I'm gonna organize my screens. So today we're going to still talk about money, big surprise, but we're going to talk about money that we don't have to pay back. That's my evil plan for today. So we did talk a little bit about it obviously last week, because when we started our first more complex finance plan, we already included some of the monies that we don't have to pay back. So some of it, you've heard about. It's not like entirely new, but I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into it. We know how important it is to have non-recoverable finance sources. So we covered that because it helps us improve our profits and also helps us balance some of the not so ideal projections that we sometimes might get with our firms. I'm going to dive deeper into production incentives, specifically for the US and international, to make sure you really understand what the requirements are specifically for certain regions. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can optimize these incentives. And we're going to talk about the other finance sources, which I quickly mentioned: crowdfunding, music investments. And I'm going to have Jim do something today. He can talk about brand entertainment because he does this every day, all day long. So we can do that one. So you get to know him. And then in-kind services and deferments. And most of you know this. I'm going to do 2 studies today with you today. One is to do with what happens when we have not so ideal options. We did this a little bit last time, but I kind of rushed through it. I want you guys to dive into this because you're going to face a situation where you have a project that does not have ideal numbers. You still want to make the project and you still want to make a profit with the project. So I really want you to understand what the options will be in order for you to do that. So that's why I'm going to run some more options on that. And then there is a project that is on Canvas, which was a film project I made up. I'm going to have you do a version of that today. So the tax credits and rebates is what we do in the US when we go into certain regions in the US, certain states who are focused on elevating the industry as such in their region. So they likely will not have, when they start out, have any entertainment industry at all. I'm gonna take a little sip here because Jim is gonna kill me if I don't drink this. I forgot to finish it. Hey, Jim, you know what you could do? I just saw someone send language to English. You can try sending it to Spanish and see if it works.
Oh, let me see if I can do that.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I have this company from Mexico City that wants me to do a seminar for them, and some of them only speak Spanish, and my Spanish really sucks, so that's not gonna work. So maybe I have one of you translate because we just went through a lot of it that I'm gonna teach them. We'll figure it out. Anyway, so tax credits and tax rebates. We're going to talk about the difference. Then we're going to talk about international subsidies and grants, when they apply, how they apply, which of those are actually, some of them actually will have a component of repayment, but it's a really odd component that we'll talk about in a moment. Crowdfunding, of course, music investment, we covered a little bit last time, and then brand integration. So here is the main sources on one slide of the things you should find a version of in any finance plan you do. You don't have to have all of them, because when you shoot in the US, you're likely not going to have international subsidies unless you shoot in the US and you shoot in Canada, which happens. You shoot in the US and you shoot in England and Australia, also so forth. If you shoot in two jurisdictions at the same time, which is absolutely possible, you can combine the US production incentives and the international production incentives. You can combine those. And depending on where you are for the time that you're there and how much money you spend while you're there, the incentive will apply for the eligibility of the cost you're spending during that time. That's for the most incentives, the case. So for most incentives, they're basically going to say to you, when are you showing up here? Who are you showing up with? What are you going to do with these people? Will you hire some locals? Will you bring in people from your country or from your state? And how do we deal with that? So when we bring people from the US, which sometimes we do, we bring department heads, we bring producers, we bring cast. Some of the US incentives will pay us for that for the time that we're there, right? So that's okay. So they basically go and say, well, you brought Jason Statham for 3 weeks, and Jason Statham makes $2 million on this movie that is 6 weeks. And so we will look at his, what did I say, $2 million? Okay, whatever it was. We will look at the $2 million for 6 weeks, and we'll apply half of that because you're only shooting half the movie for our region. So the $2 million that Jason Statham will get paid, $1 million of that would be applicable for the incentive state in the US. And then the other $1 million will be applicable wherever Jason Statham goes next, let's say England or wherever. And that is the case anytime you go into a jurisdiction that will support above the line, because talent is a portion of the above the line. The same for producer fees. Now, when I go to the US in a different state that supports above the line, and I go to an international jurisdiction, the same will apply for my producer fee. Very happy about that. So above the line is something you want to look when you go to the Entertainment Partners website, which I think I shared with you once before. I think it's just ep.com or entertainmentpartners.com. They have, and it's also in the module, an interactive site where you can click on the regions and it will tell you what is eligible in expenses and what and how much percentage they will give you. And it will also tell you how many have actually spent their money already, because certain regions might already spend it. That's usually not the case for international. Some, yes, but most of them not. But it is the case for US states. Some of them only have a bucket of a certain amount, and then they're spent for the day. So for the year. So it usually replenishes yearly. So we always need to know how much do they have left. And the way I do it, I call the film office either in the state, it's a film commission office in the state, or the film commission office in the international marketplace where I'm going, on the national country, and I ask them, who should I talk to find out how much money is available at this time or at that time, whenever I know I'm shooting. who can give me that information? They usually give me someone in the film incentive office, but these people change all the time. So I always want to know who is it, who do I need to talk to? So a good first information source is always entertainment partners. You can send them an email saying, I'm thinking of shooting here and here and here. Who should I be talking to there? And they potentially give you names. Worst comes worst, you look for the local film commissioner office, you talk to them, and they can give you whoever is responsible for the incentives, and they will then tell you what is available, what is not available. They'll also tell you if above the line or below the line is available. But in many cases, you'll see that on the entertainment partner website. So that's definitely a good resource to start with. And it's in general a good company to start with. You're going to need a payroll company anyway, so might as well have them help you. That's what entertainment partners is, by the way. They're actually a payroll company, but they expanded their services into other regions like cash flow and tax credits, working with you on tax credits, figuring out what is eligible, what is not eligible. So they're pretty good at that stuff. Another company I work with is 120DB. So 120, like the number 120 DB. They are also cash flow most of the tax credits all over, not just in the US, but also internationally. And they, because they do this every time, all day long, would also know what tax credit would pay for what, because they cash flow them all the time. So they see this. So it's not the worst idea to call them. Brand integration, again, is having to do with working with brands, including brands in your content, and that you can do that for film and television, crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, we know, and music investment income services we're going to dive into now. So let's go into the incentives. Normally what happens is you shoot your film or your TV show and you get the money when you're finished. You shoot it, you show them all your invoices, they'll do an audit and accounting for it, and then they pay you, the producer, the money for the incentive. That's how it's normally done. There's nothing wrong with that unless you need the money before in order to have it as a part of your finance plan, which is what I do because I want to reduce the cost of financing. So if I take an incentive that costs me 12 to 15%, I'm not paying my investor 20%. So I'm saving 8%, which is why I want this in advance. The range of the payment that you will pay for this lender to give you the incentive in advance of you shooting in the state is going to be around that. It's going to be somewhere around 12 to 15%. So here's another reason why I like doing this, especially with specialized lenders, not with banks, because when you go to a bank, and I'm saying you can do it with the bank, but here's the difference between the bank and the lender. The bank will say, we're going to add this incentive loan to your general loan. So you now have a bigger loan with the bank, and they will treat this big loan like they treat a big loan. And if you don't pay them, they want to take your movie. So imagine this scenario, which actually happened to me. You're going to Iowa, you're shooting your movie there because they give you an incentive of 50% of the budget. I was one of the first 3 movies that went there. And shortly after I went there, other people came and they bought Ferraris and Porsches, and all of those were picture cars with that money from Iowa. So Iowa was very unhappy about the misuse of their funds, and they closed that program down, I think not even 3 months or 6 months after we were there. So I was lucky because what I did, I got the incentive cash flow in advance by 120DB. And when they cash flow this for me, they also take over the risk of getting paid by the incentive state. It's not my risk because I'm assigning everything to them. I'm basically telling them, here is all my rights to the incentive. You get everything, you deal with everything. So they will then also be the ones that would be impacted in case of any changes in the legislation. And there's stuff that changes all the time. My situation was very drastic in this case because they just stopped the incentive entirely. So no one got money. Even 120DB had to sue the state of Iowa to get the $5 million from the state of Iowa for the $5 million that they lent to me. I was fine because I was like, yeah, you deal with Iowa. Don't come to me. Don't come crying. Now, if I would have gotten that money from Comerica, who was my lender on this movie, this was the movie that I did with Adrian Brody and Frost Whitaker. If I would have done this with Comerica, I would have said to Comerica, add this to my loan. What do you think would have happened? Anyone, any ideas? We're talking about $5 million. Paul, what?
You
around-
wouldn't have gotten that $5 million.
Yeah, what would have happened to me though, as the producer and to my movie?
You would you wouldn't have made any profit on it because that would all go to paying off the however else you finance that money.
Well, I would have lost my movie, is the long story short. Because potentially, because if I get a loan that is 2 years to be repaid, and the original bank loan was a gap loan, I think I got 15% in gap. You guys have the finance plan actually in the modules, you know better than me. So I got a gap loan, I got the pre-sale loan, right? I got the bank loan, which was about, I don't know, 4 million or whatever it was. And that was against pre-sales and unsold rights. And if I would have added another 5 million, this loan would have been, about $9 million. There's no way I could have paid $9 million back in 18 months, which is what my term was. I would have not been able to do that with the unsold rights. And the other problem is, I don't think I even had left $5 million in unsold rights to cover this loan because it wasn't supposed to be covered. This was a non-recoupable finance source. I wasn't expecting this to end up in my waterfall. Everyone and their grandmother would have been screwed. So that is why I would suggest if you get a loan for the incentive, use a specialized lender and separate this loan from your other bank loan. Don't use the same lender for this. And make sure that the agreement says, I'm going to pay you. Usually they charge a little more than a bank. And say, well, because you're charging me 2 points more, whatever it is, you're going to take over this incentive. You're going to deal with them. I don't want to hear about it. And many times that's the case. That's what they do. So that's something to remember as a big pointer for you to not only get the incentive loan because you want to get it. What is happening here? In order to reduce costs for your financing, and also in order to not pay all the profits to an equity investor who would have normally given you the money, because you don't only pay 20% on the money that you get if you're not using this. You also will, of course, give away profit points in addition. That's why you want this in advance. Yes, Mashka?
So I wanted to ask about, you said that, the bank is then taking care of that. You're assigning that incentive to them and they're going to deal with it. So I'm only asking because I'm dealing with the state of Maryland right now. So they had me basically give them this report of all the costs of Maryland. So is that something that you would just give the bank and then
That's
they would
something-
negotiate with the state?
Exactly. So if you would have gone to a lender like 120DB, and it's not really a bank, it's usually a specialized lender that does incentives, and that's all they do. You would have talked to Peter Graham at 120DB and would have said, here's what I'm thinking of spending there, and I'm going to go shoot the movie. Now you've done the movie, you would take what you're doing now, all the auditing work, and all the receipts and everything, you would hand it to Peter, and he gives it to his auditor, and they will then give it to Maryland, and they will then get the money from them. Exactly. So that's another reason why I like doing it. Who likes paperwork? No bueno. So that's why, you don't want to deal with any of it. We as producers have huge headaches as it is. We don't need to be dealing with this stuff. So there isn't really, I'm trying to find a negative for someone not to get a loan in advance. I just can't. And people tell me, well, I could just make the movie. Yeah, you could just make the movie, and then you pay all the fees and you give all the things away for something you could have gotten for much less money. But then, so the only reason why this potentially would not work is if you have an incentive region that is unreliable.
The only thing,
Yeah.
sorry, can I just, the only thing that I can think of is like, it might be difficult, like when I'm thinking of like doing this, it might be difficult to predict like how, because for example, like, yeah, it's only the costs that we're spending in Maryland. So it might be difficult to predict exactly how much money we're going to spend in Maryland until, we get there and do the spending.
It's close. You know what when you go into production, you know exactly what you're shooting, where you're shooting, and who you're taking, and what you're spending money on. You're doing this during
Okay.
production, I mean, yes,
Mhm.
could there be something unusual that shows up? Yeah, fine. Like, for example, we also have contingency in our budget. We don't know how we're gonna spend the contingency, for example. We don't know.
Mhm.
We may or may not use it in Maryland. We don't know, which is why that's not part of the equation when they give you the opinion letter to say, how much are you spending here? Because you don't know what exactly, they give you a range, right? So the lender
Right.
will then say, I'm looking at this, and when they give you a letter saying this is how much we think we'll give you, the lender will take that into consideration, which is why they're charging you 15%.
Got it.
You
Yes.
know, they're charging you, they're giving their.
They are.
You know, do you give them $1 million? Let's say you get an incentive for $1 million, no, they keep 150. And so, you know, they have a reserve there, and the reserve is also the contingency. And here's the other thing. To your point, Mashka, we don't know what we're actually spending, right? We don't know also how we're spending the contingency. It's just the buffer that we put in the budget in case, you know, stuff goes sideways. If we spend more and we have a bank loan, we will be the beneficiary of the incentive in connection with what we spend more in Maryland. Stick with your example, right? We will be the beneficiary of that because we get paid from the incentive and we basically pay our lender. So that's basically how it works. We still have to do your work, the whole accounting work. We have to do that, by the way, when we get the loan from the bank.
Oh,
That-
yeah.
That we have to do that. But if we go with 120BB or an incentive lender, sometimes what they do, not always, but sometimes they say, you know what? If you spend more, I'll keep it. To take the overage on this. Because they're like, yeah, we don't know, you may or may not, and this is kind of our cushion and our buffer. So sometimes you'll find that they'll say, well, we'll spend more, so what do? In a situation like that, you keep your contingency very small. And you build cushions in your line items. So you're not putting the stuff in the contingency, you basically say, yeah, I thought I'm hiring 3 people, but it's gonna be 5 people. I thought I'm doing this much set build, but it's gonna be more, and I thought I'm paying this much. So you basically put the cushion into the line item rather than the contingency. You're gonna need some cushion anyway, but who is to say that you have to put this in contingency? There's no law, it's no contingency law, unless you work with the computational companies we'll talk about. But the point is, this is how you can avoid this kind of a trick that the incentive lender will use to cover their budget.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
So to avoid the risk of changing legislation, for example, the movie that I produced in New York with Jason Statham and Mickey Rourke and 50 Cent and much more, testosterone that I could even handle. Anyway, so we shot it in New York, and while I was there, the tax incentive was 25%, which was fine. And you know, the way they pay you is usually you give them the movie, you give them all the receipts. I mean, in this case, I gave it to the incentive lender, and then they'll give it to you, let's say by the end of the year or whatever, within a year. It's not, doesn't usually take that long. And while I was shooting there, this was also, thank God, I signed a deal with an incentive lender. New York decided, well, we're not going to pay the incentive in a year. We're going to pay it in installments over 5 years. Can you imagine? I would have done a bank loan. Again, I would have been screwed royally because my bank loan is 18 to 24 months maximum. And if they want to pay me in 5 years, not only am I going to pay an arm and a leg and interest for these 5 years, but with the bank loan, again, I would have lost my movie. So not great. So avoiding the legislation changes that we really don't want to deal with because we make our finance plan based on what it is today. We tell our investors this is your profit based on our finance plan. And if something goes sideways because someone changes their mind about legislation, we're holding the stick. And I don't like that. So this is something where I really want you to be aware when you go to these states and really be careful in who you're getting to do your incentive. The reason why we do incentives is pretty straightforward. We want to make more money with our movie. We want to increase the profitability of the film, and we can do it because there are incentives between 20 and 40% in the US that are available to us. And that is 20 to 40% of the budget. So why would we not do this? And it just changes the budget number, meaning the percentage changes simply in connection with where you're going and what you're doing. You want to have someone look at the incentive that, you know, that you're dealing with. And that's why I always mention investment partners, because you want someone to give you an opinion as to what can I optimize. And that's another thing. You have a line item that is maybe containing an element or a cost or an expense that would not be eligible necessarily. Well, maybe there is a cousin line item that you can use. I call it cousin line item, that you can move this to. You know, we all have cousins. So there are things where when you know they're not going to pay me for camera equipment, but they will pay me for lights. All right. Maybe we'll, you know, have some more lights, less camera. There's things. So all I want to say is this kind of person that is a specialist to help you analyze what your incentive should be and how it should be optimized is very useful. They don't cost anything. So they just want you to hopefully do the incentive with them or do payroll with them. And that's why they do it. So it is something for you to consider, because sometimes moving around line items to cousins and sisters and brothers and so forth, as we call them, could optimize the money that you get. I'm not telling you to cheat. I would never tell you to cheat. But sometimes, you know, things change and the budget shifts. This is all we're talking about. So no, I don't want anyone to go to jail. But this is where an analyst like that can come into play and can really tell you the details of how you can optimize your budgeted line items to optimize what this incentive will do for you. And you want to make sure that you work with an incentive lender who is willing to take on the legislation changes. That's important, because by now, some of them got smart and they're like, yeah, we're giving you the money, but we're not willing to take on the legislation changes. And then you will say, well, if you're not willing to take the risk, then I'll go with the bank because they're cheaper. So unless you then lower the money that you're making, I'm not interested. And most of the time what they'll say is, no. We'll take on the risk. We're fine. So just push back a little when you have someone that says, we don't want to take the risk. So there's a difference between credits and rebates. So we hear things like, what is a tax credit? What is a transferable tax credit? What is a refundable tax credit? What is a rebate? It's when you do the loan, you don't care. You don't even need to remember the slide. But if you want to know what it is, the credit is something that the state has approved for sale. So meaning, when the state says to me, Jeanette, we're going to give you $1 million credit, I have to find a company in, let's say the state is New Mexico, that will buy my credit. Obviously, I'm not going to do that because I have the incentive lender do it. But if I don't use an incentive lender, then I will have to find that company early on. So I'll be looking around who is in the state, who has to pay taxes. I have to call the companies that are in the state. I have to call them up and then say, I have a credit, do you want to buy it? And then they will buy it, but they'll buy it as a discount. And that discount sometimes is pretty hefty. Could be up to 50% of my credit. That's really not great. So that's another reason why I do incentive lenders, because these incentive lenders for these states have buyers that they work with all the time and that they give these credits to. So they know who to call. They know who needs a credit in order to reduce the tax burden that they would normally have. Because what they're doing is they're using the credit, means they have to pay less taxes, which is good for them. So that's what the credit means. It's not cash to you. It is a letter to you in form of credit that you then have to go sell. It's a little bit, it's a little bit crazy. So the transferable tax credit can be transferred to a like in between person, like a broker person who would do the same thing, find a company and sell it. So transferable and tax credit is kind of the same thing. It's just like you have one more person in between and they're costing money, which is also not ideal. Another reason why you want to use an incentive. The refundable tax credit is a liability that is issued, and it acts a little bit like a rebate. So what a rebate is, just go straight to that, is you spend the money in the local region and the government gives you the money. And the refundable tax credit kind of works the same way, just as a fancy name. So it's the same thing than the rebate where you actually don't have to find a buyer. You don't have to find a broker. You can just use the credit and you can get the money yourself. So the US incentives are often used in many cases for different kind of content. So you have to look at, is my TV series going to be supported? Is my nonfiction documentary going to be supported? Or is it just film? So you look at the different kinds of content pieces that will be supported in the different regions, because it's not all the same. And it even is the case that they would say to you, yeah, we'll give you 30% if it's a movie, we'll give you 15% if it's a nonfiction, or if it's a TV series. So it sometimes changes. In Germany, when we talk about international, I want to mention that real quick. They actually created a special fund for TV series, and the TV series had to be at least 1.5 million euros per episode. Normally, when you do a TV series in Germany, they're not as expensive as they are here. You make them between 800,000 and maybe $1 million. The reason why this incentive region decided we want them to be more expensive is because they wanted to attract American series to Germany, and they knew the Americans pay more. So they're automatically excluding the local TV producers, which kind of sucks for them, but that's what they did. The goal for Germany was, we want to attract Hollywood producers that produce television to our country. So whenever they do incentives, doesn't matter if it's the US or international, the deal is we want to attract money to us. We want you to spend money with us. And because you're spending money with us, we give you some of it back. That's really the general consensus that is being used for that. My international incentives, the way they work, kind of like this one. My Excel, my problems. So the international incentives can work in a way that it can be beneficial that you have a European director. It can be beneficial that you have a European writer. It can be beneficial that your producers, some of them are European producers. We call this point system. Doesn't have to be though. Not every incentive international requires you to have any one of these people be European. So it's not the same wherever you go. So there are systems in place where, because you're going to shoot in a foreign country, they will act like a US state. You're going there, you're spending money there, they're looking at what's eligible of what you're spending there, and they'll give you money. But if you have some European components, like a co-writer on the script that happens to be European, that can be sometimes arranged. Maybe there is a director that you look at that could be a UK director. I mean, those are good. Canadians, who knows? There are things for you to consider that could help. Also actors. I mean, there's a lot of great actors in Europe that you could consider for certain parts that don't have to be Americans, especially if you don't want to travel your entire cast. So the more you can get that is, especially in Europe, has European passports, the more money you get, and it's exponentially more. So I really would look into that. The European co-producer that you would hire to help you with this will guide you in this case. So it's not so much an entertainment partner question in this situation when it comes to international subsidies. It is more something that you would discuss with an international co-producer. And the way you find them, you look at similar movies that you want to make that were shot in the country that you want to shoot in, and you see who the service production company is. Who was the local producer on this? This is how you can find them. Or even easier, you call the local film office and you let them give you a list of local production companies that have handled American product. Also, you can have them give you a list of local line producers. They will also know who these companies are, and you're going to need that anyway, because you're going to go into this region with an American budget that needs to be adjusted for the location. And what you'll find in Europe specifically is that the way we structure teams is not necessarily the way they structure teams on a movie. They don't necessarily require, like we do with our union, all these different positions to be paid for and hired. So you will find that you can make your movie potentially for less money because you might have to hire less people, and then the rates might actually be less than what you would be paying here. So in addition to a credit that you would get or an incentive that you would get, you also will benefit from the fact that they structure their teams differently. I'm going to just switch this one. So there. They structure the teams differently and they have different rates. And obviously it depends on what country do you go into and what does your budget translate to. But you're going to need a local line producer to kind of work this budget with you. The local elements that you can find will help you get more money, but they're not always necessary. But let's say, which I like, there is something called double dipping, and it's totally legal. There's nothing illegal about it. You're shooting a TV series, which is what Jim and I are working on. You're shooting a TV series, let's say in Germany, let's say we're in Cologne, which is very close to the Belgian border, and you shoot it in Belgium, on both sides of the coin. The Belgians give you 50% of the budget. That's not true, 45% to be precise. The Germans will give you 25% plus some grants. When I take my German cameraman who gets 25% in Germany to Belgium, guess what? I get another 45% there. So I'm getting for the same person, only because it's a German cameraman, when they go to Belgium, I get money from the Germans and I get money from the Belgians. And there are a lot of countries in Europe where that applies. So if you have an English actor that goes to Belgium to shoot, they would get the 25% from England and the 45% from Belgium, if Belgium supports above the line, which I right now don't remember. But this is where, when you combine countries, you can look into, when you talk to the co-producers that are local, to see, listen, is there a way that we can, maybe we can shoot some of these things in a close by country that's, you know, from Cologne to Belgium, it's 1 hour with the car, so it's not that far. So these are certain regions that sometimes can optimize. And what we looked at, Jim and I, we did a regular American TV series. I mean, there's nothing super German about it. It just could have been, we could shoot it anywhere. We needed to be somewhere where we can find old buildings because it is set in the 30s and 40s and 50s. So we needed to find some architecture, but it was, a lot of it was inside. So we could have shot in any studio. A lot of it wasn't really location specific. And so when we were done with the budgeting, with, you know, how are we shooting this, and we figured out we can do this in Germany and in Belgium, we ended up with 65% of the budget to get just by doing this kind of combination. And so there are certain combinations that you can do in Europe that will benefit you for looking into this. And a lot of the producers that live in these countries like Germany, England, France, Spain, they know the double dipping part. And again, it's not illegal to do it, but it's something you want to talk to them about when you bring your product to them. Even within the country, like in Spain, when you go to the Spanish islands, like Gran Canaria, you can get 35 to 45%. If you stay in main Spain, it's going to be somewhere around 30%, 25 to 30. So depending on, and this, by the way, could change, but depending on where you are, even within the country, this could be applicable to you. So something to think about when you go there. And I think I mentioned last time that the one thing you need to be careful with is you're going to have to give your rights to the local producer in order for them to apply for these credits for you. So you're assigning basically the rights to your movie to them. So therefore you have to be careful in saying, I get the rights back when you're done with what you're doing, so that not in the end of the day, you know, this producer goes like, yeah, I got Jeanette's movie and I'm going to go and do something with it and she can stay there and hold the stick. So we don't want that. So those are the little things you really need to be careful with. And I believe I mentioned this where the cash flowing part, remember for the US incentives, we do need someone to lend us the money so we can get it for the production and for the finance plan. In many of these European countries, you don't need to cash flow because they cash flow themselves. So you don't need a loan, you don't need a bank, you don't need an incentive lender, because they basically say, what is your production cash flow plan? When do you need the money by? We'll give it to you when you need. Now, in addition to these tax credits, which are percentages that are paid to you in connection with the cost you're spending in the country and its eligibility. There are grants, and these grants are paid on top of that. So in addition to the money that you get, and this is for Europe and a lot of country outside of the US the case, in addition to the credit that we know as a credit here in the US, they give you specialty grants. And these grants can be very nice. They can be up between 500 to like $2 million on a project, which is, significant. The only thing they want to see is that you spend at least 150 to 200% of that money in that region. That's another thing. You're massaging your budget. You do that with your co-producer in a way that you can deliver on that request. They know the request. You want to deliver on that. So you will ask them, how do I get my hands on the $1 million grant in addition to the tax credit? They're going to say, we have to spend $1 million in this particular region of this country, and let's move some things around. And they know what to move and they know how to move it. It's complex, but it's worth the conversation. And it's not something that you have to lose your hair over because your co-producer will know how to manage this. Now, in certain countries, like Germany, that money, that grant is to be repaid. Hold on. What do you mean repaid, Jeanette? We thought it was free. What are we doing here? Well, here's the funny thing. It's repaid on paper, but here's how it's repaid. You're going to go through the waterfall. Remember, you pay your sales agent, you pay your loan, you pay your equity investor, you pay the equity investor's premium, you pay the profits, and then you pay the grant. So they're very far down the line. And here's the best part. If you pay that grant back, they put it in an escrow account, and it sits there for you to use for your next movie, no questions asked. So you could use it. So it's basically where, yes, you have to repay it one time, but then it kind of rolls, and it's always available for you. You don't have to apply for any, that grant is always there. You can apply for an additional grant. Now you get $1 million from the grant that you have from the first movie, and you get another $1 million for the new grant. Now it's $2 million plus the tax credit. So these things add up, and it's something that's specifically the case in Europe. So I would, if you ever work on a project where you think it would make sense to shoot there, it's definitely worth talking to some European co-producers to see if there is a there. So when we're talking about official treaty co-productions, yes, Mashka?
Have you ever shot in Hungary?
I've not shot there, but I have a student in the last semester that just started a production company there. And he told me that, Hungary is known to be very generous, 40%, not expensive. They're very generous. The only negative thing that I've heard, and I don't know if it's still the case, is that you need a little bakshish. You need a little I call it envelope money to make things happen sometimes. So, but it might not be the case anymore. I think they're by now a lot more professional, and I think it's definitely worth looking into. They're building a lot of stages. They have a lot of stages. They have a lot of strong production groups by now. So I think it's definitely worth looking into.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no, great question. So when we talk about treaty co-productions, it's something where two countries work together. We in the US have no treaty with anyone. Hollywood doesn't have treaties. But producers in countries like Germany, Spain, Canada, Italy, France, Australia, South Africa, they all have treaties with each other. And the reason why that is because they support each other, which means if you work with two countries that have a treaty with each other, like Germany and Belgium, for example, or Germany and England, or Ireland, there's a lot of people, they are actually giving you more money because it's an official treaty co-production. And it will be dealt with in this situation, if it's an official co-production, it will not only be dealt with in a way that you can get more money, you also get a higher license fee from both countries. So if you do a treaty co-production where you say, I'm going to shoot my movie in France and in Germany, and I'm going to make it an official treaty co-production between those two, the French license deal and the German license deal is going to be a lot higher than what usually sell, than what you usually would be able to sell the German and the French license for. So you're looking at a license fee that's between, I would say, roughly 10 and 30% more, at least. I think it's even more than 10, but I'm being conservative, than what you normally would get. So it's definitely worth looking into. If you know you're going to shoot in 2 countries, then make it an official co-production. It's not a big deal. It's just a deal between 2 production companies. One is French, one is Germany. They're all working on your behalf. They both each get only 5% of what they raise for you. So you're not losing money. All you're doing is you put an official treaty co-production deal in place. Then you can get more money from Canal Plus in France. Then you get more money from ProSieben in Germany. So that's how that works. It's something to really think about in order to optimize revenues when it comes to making these productions. And when you look into the double dipping part of it, it is also something that happens with treaty co-productions, particularly because they deal with the treaty of 2 countries like this would be 1 country. That is why, the person that lives in this country, when they go to the other country, they get paid from this country and they get paid from the other country twice. All legal. So that's what treaty co-productions will help you with. So crowdfunding, we know the Kickstarters and the GoFundMes, often done for lower budgeted movies. And the reason why I think it is actually a good thing to do for lower budgeted movies, even if you don't need the money, frankly, is because it creates awareness for your film. Because all these people that give you $10 to get them a hat or a mug will talk about your movie. I'm investing in this movie. I'm so excited. So for many people that do lower budget movies, they're not just doing it to raise money. They're doing it to create an audience. And because they created an audience, if they take this movie to sell it to a streamer or another buyer, they can say, look, I have 150,000 people that gave me $1, and this 150,000 people know about my movie, and they're going to go see it wherever it streams. So this kind of audience has a value. It has a value for streamers. It has a value for television buyers. It has a value for theatrical buyers. So sometimes it's something to think about when you want to give some money, even if it's a small amount, that you want to raise on Kickstarter. But you want to give it some exposure in form of a marketing scheme if you want. So that's something to think about. There are new crowdfunding websites. And I want to warn you about those that ask you to pay money in order to put your project up on their platform. They're charging between $1,000 and $10,000 per project just for you to put it up on their platform. And you don't know if they raise even $1 for you. You don't know. I mean, that sounds great. We're going to raise, $3 million for you, $5 million for you with all investors. Who knows if they even have investors? I want that scheme. I want to have a website where I tell you, give me $5,000 for every project you upload. And maybe I'll give you money, maybe I don't. It sounds like a great scheme to me. I've yet to find someone who actually made money with those. If you know someone, if you have experience, share. But I have only heard about the fact that they're actually asking you to pay money, and that makes me nervous. So I would, if you find a website like this or like a platform like this, ask what happens if you don't raise money. Am I getting my money back, or how does that work? No one so far could give me an answer to this. So if you figure it out, please let me know. So I would warn you with those crowdfunding sites, and they offer a lot of money. They offer money in the millions, which I have a hard time believing that that's works. If someone makes it work, please let me know. So those I want you to be careful with. There's also something called crowdsourcing, which basically is nothing else than you putting up your movie on a site like, for example, Stage 32, and they used to do this, where people want to work on your movie for free. They want to get experience, they want to get a credit, and they offer their services to you for free. So you have a budgeted line item for a person in your team, and then there's someone on this crowdsourcing site that says, I've done this job a few times, and I'd like to expand to bigger projects, or I'd like to work with you on this project because it's an interesting project. I'd be happy to do it. Now, the balance for you obviously is to gauge, can they do what you need them to do? Number one, can give them an important job. I would warn you on that one. But there are positions where that makes total sense. Someone, for example, is very experienced as a unit production manager who wants to elevate their career to become a line producer. There's nothing wrong with hiring someone like that and give them the line producing credit as the first credit, and then they give you their services either for free or for less than what you would have paid to the line producer. So that's an example where crowdsourcing can make sense. As I mentioned here, Dom, yes, go ahead.
Hi, Jeanette. What's your opinion on crowdsourcing or crowdfunding? How do I put this? Making a project look less quality, to cheapen a production. But what's your opinion on that? Do you think it's like
production? Are you saying that if you put it on a site like that, it cheapens your production?
I've heard people steer away from it for that reason. I love that you mentioned it makes awareness and creates an audience, but do you think it can do the opposite and sort of
I have not heard this because I have seen, wasn't it Jim, do you remember the famous movie that was crowdsourced? It was, I think, $3.5 million with the
Yeah, it was a Kristen Bell movie. I think it was the remake of her TV series, I think.
Calling Sarah or something? What was it? Some movie. No, it wasn't that. But it was a movie that was fairly big. It was, I think, 3.5 million, maybe 5.
I think there's one movie that was even at 5 million was funded at 5 million.
So they went top movie, top cast. They went
Veronica Mars.
Thank you.
Exactly. So they raised that money on I want to say Kickstarter, right, Jim?
Yeah.
Or
GoFundMe, one of them.
Yeah, I think you are the person that could potentially make your movie less than if you don't present it right. And that's the other thing. You need to have a kind of a mood trailer or some kind of trailer that will suggest to the audience out there that you're going to produce a very high quality movie.
Right.
What you do is you would use, your like team. Let's say you have a DP from Lord of the Rings. You have the costume designer from Harry Potter. You have the production designer from, I don't know, some other, big movie or TV series. When you have people like that on a video to say, we're so excited to make this movie with Dom and we can't wait to work on it. And then you have, and you have the credits on the side, this is what they have done. When you have teams like that and you can flaunt this, which I think is important, and I think we can all get strong teams for us if we have an interesting project, that would work against the assumption that people would have that this would be a less than project.
Absolutely.
I do agree with you that if someone puts up a mood or a short trailer that was clearly shot with an iPhone, why would I give them $5? And he's like, really? We're going to just go do something else with the money. I already know. So I think there is a point in what you're saying, but I do think you can work against that by making your presentation high quality and already letting people know you're not doing this the cheapo way.
Awesome. I like the way you counted that. Thank you. Yeah. That's really good.
No, I think that's a great question. I appreciate that.
Cheers.
So the benefits for me really is A, you don't have to pay it back, no matter which version, crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, and B, it does expand awareness. The negatives for me personally, and I'm just being me, I'm just lazy. If I have to, prepare a whole mood trailer and I have to prepare a whole, marketing campaign, I don't do it enough. I would hire someone, if any one of you thinks of this, I would hire someone, and there are people that actually do this, that is known to know how to do a strong Kickstarter campaign. I would just give them a few $1,000s and say, tell me what I need to do and do it. Because it's very, it can be cumbersome to do. And you have to have a bit of a marketing brain, which Jim has, I don't. So to me, it's like, if it's not in a spreadsheet, I don't know if I can do this. So I'm not the most, visionary person when it comes to stuff like that. But a lot of people are, and they have great marketing brains, and the way they present a project is super interesting. It's not one of my strengths, which is why I kind of go, okay, can I hire someone to do this? And do I want to? Do I not take too much of my time? So that's kind of the way for me. But it depends on what you're doing. I don't think, if you don't mind the work that comes with it to present your project in a nice light, I think it can have actually some success there. I've seen that to actually work for people with lower budgets.
Jeanette, also, it may have a little bit of relevance to the idea of getting pre-sales in that if you have a pitch deck and it's very compelling and you put it up on Kickstarter and you say, we're making this amazing movie, we're going to be the next Coda, get on board now, right? You might raise more money than you think of, showing that there's a definitive interest, or nobody might want to fund you, and that may tell you something too.
No, I think you have a point. I think even if you can say you have some pre-sales, for example, then you're ahead of 99% of people on that platform. Jim, you may bring up a very important point where the fact that you have some finance elements already will make you stand out tremendously from the crowd of all the people trying to finance their movie on there. So that's something to actually use to your advantage to say, this thing is real. We're not waiting for, we don't need the minimum. There's always a minimum that's connected that you have to raise in order to get the money. We already have the minimum because we raised it different ways. So that's a big, minimum as in theoretically, right? Through P-sales or whatever other finance sources you work with. But if you can say we already have some money, that's always an advantage. So in-kind services and deferments, you guys know, one is you pay back, the other one you don't. So in-kind services, basically, as I mentioned, someone's kind enough to not charge you for what they're doing or giving you. So in-kind services are often done by people who are willing to forego a portion or all of their salary or service fee to support you and maybe to go into your profit pool. An in-kind service could be a profit participant component where someone says, I'm not going to charge you, but I want 3% of the profits. Is that something that you would do? Because sometimes they say that you they think that they can make more money being a profit participant than giving them $100 for being a PA as a crass example. So that's what in-kind services is. Not necessarily do they need and do they get profit participation, but many times that's what you find. Deferments, they don't get profit participation for the most part, unless it's an A-level actor. So let's talk about that first. If an A-level actor who gets normally $5 million does your movie for $500,000, they'll say to you, I'll defer 4.5 million because that's what I would normally get. Obviously, you're going to negotiate that down and say, this is not a movie that pays $4 million. I'm making the movie for $2 million, so I'm deferring another 500 from you. That's it. So you don't necessarily have to defer the amount that would meet their quote. The quote is when you call the agent and say, I want to make this movie for $2 million. What's this person's quote right now? And they'll say, well, for independent, it's this much. For studio, it's that much. So they all have their quote. But it's really just a guideline. So you don't really have to worry about it too much. But if someone like that who gets normally paid $5 million, let's stick with that example, would make your movie for $500,000 because they really like the role. And I had situations like that. The maximum I would defer, the maximum amount I would let them defer would be the amount that I paid them in the budget. So I'm not going to give them more than what I already paid them. So if someone gets 500, I'll defer another 500 and you go home. In addition, though, I will give this actor profit participation. That could be anywhere from 5 to, I think the highest I've ever paid is 25% of the profits. That's kind of the range. So the more they lower their rate, the less they ask you to put in the deferment category, the higher the profits. So you can think about that profit participation, kind of take the pain away from you having to pay them in the waterfall or in the budget. That's how you deal with the profits. So that would be something where the deferment itself would be the component where you can gauge, is this really worth me giving them profit participation or not? So if someone says to you, you're paying me 500,000, I'm going to get another 500,000 as a deferment, and this is a, let's say, $2.5 million movie, I would give this person 5% profits in a situation like that, because you need to look at the framework. This is a low budget movie. They're doing it basically because they feel like this is a great role for them, and you're giving them profits. But it's not a big movie, so you can't, give too much. put, they're barking, maybe you give them 10%, but that'll be probably it. If it's a budget that's a little higher, you can give them a little more, because chances are you might make more money with the movie, because it's a different kind of movie, it's more expensive. But you don't want to give them too much early on, because then there's not much left for you, so be careful with your profits. The bond companies, which we'll talk about in detail, what their actual job is, but you already know it's a production insurance company. They want to see exactly the deals that you're doing, because they want to make sure the liability does not transfer to them. So you want to make sure that when you tell them, I'm going to give you this and this deferment, or I'm going to give you this or this fee, and I'm going to give you this profit participation, that the bond company, if you're using the bond company to insure your project, is in agreement with whatever deal structure you're doing. Let me give you an example. There is a visual effects company. The movie has a lot of visual effects. And normally, if you would do the visual effects properly, the visual effects would cost $5 million and the movie's budget is $3 million. So obviously that's not going to work. But you do want this visual effects company and they do want to work with you. So you say to them, listen, let's focus on the money shots for visual effects. What do we want to do here and how much would that cost? It's still more money than you can spend. So the next conversation then is, will you defer some of this? And many times they say yes. So oftentimes visual effects companies and post-production houses will defer about 50% of their fee, what they're supposed to get. What they then do is they charge a premium on the money that they're deferring. So if they're deferring, let's say the post-production, stick with the visual effect company, Jeanette. Visual effect company, the visual effects are $1 million, the way they presented them to you. They're going to charge you $500,000 in the budget, and they're going to charge you $500,000 deferred. You would pay them $550,000. The premium in a case like this is usually 10%. Don't pay them more, because otherwise you might as well, have the equity less than the money, which is 20%. But now you're doing 10, so you're saving money. I have not seen profit participations in situations like that, but here's what the bond company doesn't like. When you do a deal with the visual effect house, they don't want you to do any deals where if they do more work and end up charging you more money, that this could theoretically take the budget to an overage, where in this position visual effects now all of a sudden there's going to be more payable. And they're very nervous about visual effects, because when someone gives you a really great bid, they know chances are they cannot stick to their bid. They will probably go over, like when you have a contractor build a house, usually they go over. So bond companies will then go to the visual effect company and say, we will only agree to this deal if you agree, visual effect company, to pay the overages that could occur. Otherwise, we will not let this deferment deal fly. So then you go to the visual effect company and say, I love the fact that you let us defer $500,000 of the $1 million bill, but if you go over $1 million with our visual effects, you won't have to leave it. And that's an important conversation for you to have, because that's going to be applicable. And that is the same with post-production houses that offer you a deferment for post-production fees. That's the same for someone who builds a set, because sometimes constructions can go over, and you don't want to deal with that either if they defer. So the bond company is always keen on watching these deferment deals to make sure they're not going to be holding the stick in the air for something that costs more than it's supposed to cost. So that's how that should work on. So the brand integration sponsorships, they only make sense with the project that will align with the message of the brand. Jim, do you want to talk about this?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well,
Hold on, Vanessa asked the question. Avenida Productions is a small movie studio that does a great job assisting with. Oh, there you go. Did you see this? Thank you, Janessa. Yeah, great, fantastic. All right, Jim.
You're
Sorry, I
welcome.
didn't want to interrupt
Oh,
you.
also I had a quick question.
Yeah.
When it comes to deferment, how long is the usual time frame do you have to after the waterfall to get everybody their money from the deferment?
Okay, very good question. You don't know the time, because here's the thing. Other than the bank, or maybe other than the senior lender, maybe the junior lender, no one has an agreement where it says you have to pay me by this date. So what happens is, Janessa, they get paid when the money comes in. And what can happen, that it never comes in. and then they don't get the refund. They are taking that risk, and you will not have to pay that. I'm so glad you asked me. So in our example with the visual effect company, let's say the visual effect company charged you 500,000 in the budget, and they put 500,000 as deferment. You make the movie, they put their $1 million services in, of course, because they have to deliver on the visual effects, otherwise you have no movie, right? So they do everything, movie gets released, and it's a duck. It's terrible. So now we can pay the bank back, we got enough money for them, we might even be able to pay the junior lender back. But by the time we get to the deferment portion in the waterfall, there's no money coming in. Guess what? Visual effects company on all the stick. You're not responsible for that money. They take that risk, which is why they charge a premium. So
Okay.
there is no time, and please don't give them a time. So if you do a visual effects deal or any kind of deferment deal, don't put a date in by which you have to pay them, because you don't know if you can. Great
Okay.
question, thank you. Yes, Jim, sorry, we're going.
Okay. No, all good. So yeah, so brands have been involved with entertainment projects for decades and decades. Literally the start of television, there were brands right at the very beginning, Kraft Theater and GE Playhouse and things like that. And they've been involved with movies for many, many, many decades. And it's a great relationship when it works, because it helps either bring money to your project or it saves money to your project. And then you have a brand that is possibly helping you promote your project. And that can be helpful, or they're paying you money. They're not just giving you freebies. They're actually paying you as well. So there's a lot of different opportunities that can happen. And, I've worked on projects where in some cases, the brand paid for the entire budget. I worked on a project with Patron Tequila about a American Le Mans racing team that was sponsored by Patron Tequila. And they literally paid for the whole budget of the show. And essentially their logo was pretty much in every shot, because it was on every car, it was on the uniforms, it was sitting on every poster within a visual. And so they saw the value of putting money into that. They saw it as like a marketing campaign. When I did Rescue 911, we did a lot of shows with Johnson & Johnson, because they had a Safe Kids program that they were trying to keep kids safe and not, getting into the kind of issues that you would see on Rescue 911. And they paid money for us to produce certain types of segments that we would help people. And then they would promote the show on their, Band-Aid boxes. So there's a lot of great things that can happen. And, you've seen it where, in a Tom Cruise movie, he's driving some hot car. And, in those cases, when they know the movie's going to be released in 3,000 or 4,000 screens, or it's going to be, a global phenomenon, they not only give cars to the production for use in the production, but they also pay big bucks. And in some cases, there'll be advertising the Mission Impossible movie or whatever it is in their dealerships. And so it helps the movie get more audience. And it might just convince somebody to buy a BMW, maybe not the Tom Cruise version, but maybe, a BMW in general, because it's in the movie. And so this works a lot with both feature films and television projects, and even documentary projects. Jeanette and I produced a reality series called Global Beauty Masters. And it was basically Project Runway for hair, makeup, and nail artists. And we had sponsors like Revlon, Paul Mitchell, Conair, all giving money to the production because their products were used in the challenges that were given to the hairstylists. And then conversely, there were ads for the show in Sally's Beauty, which was one of the sponsors. And so it was just a way for the show to get more promotion, and then for these products to be seen being used by professionals in a professional situation in a hair and makeup competition. And so it's just very, very helpful for both a project that's trying to get seen by more people and get better ratings, and for a brand that might just find a new way to have their product put inside a television show or a movie. And a lot of people that Jeanette and I teach will go, oh my God, we have this great project. We have this character. He's always drinking Folgers coffee. And that maybe they'll give us $100,000 or $500,000. And the thing is, okay, the character that's drinking the Folgers coffee is a bank robber who kills a bank guard. And so I don't know if Folgers is going to want to get involved in that. So you have to think about how the product is going to be used in the movie or the TV series, the characters that might be using it. It's one thing if someone's just using an iPhone or a laptop. These decisions are not made casually in a lot of movies. When you see someone opening an HP, they've either paid for that privilege or they've given a bunch of computers to the movie, or both, as opposed to you're not opening an Apple. You're not opening a Mac. So, when you watch movies and TV series and you watch what beverages they're drinking, what kind of clothes they might be wearing, if they're identifiable, if they have a logo on their shirt, or they drive up to a Home Depot to pick something up, there's a reason why they didn't drive up to Lowe's. So these are all kinds of things. And in some cases, like the Tom Cruise movies, they pay millions and millions and millions of dollars to massive campaigns. And in some cases, you just get free stuff. But free stuff could mean you save thousands of dollars on your movie because you're getting free computers that are going to be used in the movie. You're getting cars that are picture cars, even though they're not giving them to you. You're still getting the use of them. On Dog Whisperer, every season, Caesar would drive a different Jeep or a car when he would arrive to his the clients. And it got to the point where, we would get 2 free cars to use in the production. Caesar would drive one of them. And at the end of the season, Caesar would get one of the cars. I'm only mildly bitter that the producers never got a car. And then they would also pay us for the fact that there was an episode, the car was in every episode when Caesar would drive up to meet the client. And so there are all these different symbiotic ways that brands and content creators can work together. But you have to think about how the product is going to be used. Like Jeanette talked about the other week, it can't just be blatantly holding up a Coke can and go, oh, this is so great. It has to be integrated in a way that makes sense for the brand and makes sense for the movie or the TV show.
I want to also mention that the reason why this is happening more and more, and I think I mentioned this in our first session, is that the advertisers don't really find that many opportunities anymore to be in commercials that people watch. I mean, yes, some of the streamers have now integrated commercials. We're seeing commercials on YouTube, but really the fact that a lot of the audience traveled from television away to areas where there's no commercial has harmed the advertising industry greatly, which is why they're looking more and more to us content creators in finding opportunities and working with us. So it is important for us to work with advertising agencies, to work with placement agencies, to talk directly to marketing heads of brands, approach them and say, I'm going to do this movie. It's going to be released internationally through the sales agent in the US. It's either we know we're going to release it through a network because we have a license deal, or we did a buy-on deal, or we did a deal with the streamer. So they need to see a little bit what is your, release strategy for the film. Raul, you have a question?
I think you can answer a lot of them, but the question was, at what point of the development process do you have this conversation, right? It kind of seems that you already have some pre-sales, you really are able to measure the interest of the product by the time you talk to these companies, correct?
I start earlier than that. So I always go with my pitch deck and talk to these people. I talk to everyone very early on with my pitch deck because
Okay.
I need to know what are my options. So when I go to someone like Spark Alliance, Devery Holmes, who's in the modules, when I talk to her and say, I'm planning on making this movie, here's my pitch deck, here's the script. I'm thinking of putting in so-and-so actor. I have so-and-so director that I'm talking to. I do think I'm going to have this sales agent. I'm not sure what I'm going to do domestic. Do you think there's something you can do? That's really how early I talk to her. And then she reads the script and she'll let me know what she needs in order to move forward. But she will have conversations with brands that will say to her, well, if this is how you release the movie, we will be willing to pay this amount. If that is how you release the movie, this is what we would be paying and how we would be paying. So there are conversations very early on because by now the brands know that we cannot tell them, because we're not a studio that can tell them the movie's going to be released in the US on 1,000 screens. We don't know that because we don't have a deal with the buyer yet in the US. That's something that they would like to know, but we're not really in a position to tell them, and they know this by now. So many times they work with the independent producer to say, well, if you get it released on 1,000 screens, we'll give you a premium or we'll pay more. And if not, we'll have to talk about what that would look like. But the conversation has to happen early also because you might have to change the script. You might have to include the product anyway in the shot, which needs to be scripted out, but you also might have to change how the product is used, mentioned, or handled by a character, because the brand has something to say about that. They want to know, how is the product integrated? Is it going to be, sloppy and not natural because it's running around showing the watch all the time and it's like in the screen for many, many, many minutes? No, they want it to be integrated and natural. So they're going to talk to you in detail very early about how this shot with this character has to go down. So there's a lot of conversations that happens very early, and because you need to know what the scene entails in order to have your budgets done, etc., you need to have these conversations early on.
By the way, Tony made a really good point. When they made the movie E.T., even though it was directed by Steven Spielberg, who'd already made Jaws and had already made Close Encounters of the Third Kind, they had a scene where they lure E.T. out with M&Ms. And M&Ms is like, I don't know. We don't need an alien. It's going to eat M&Ms. I don't know. And Reese's Pieces like, we'll do it. And Reese's Pieces is now infamous for that scene.
Yes. So yeah, not everyone is going to be, as excited, but I think it is also enough to us to make suggestions to the brands how we could integrate their product. Like in this case, it was a great example, of course, on how, because the product was used to create a positive outcome, right, in this situation. So that's how you have to think about the product needs to be used in a way that it shows it favorably. So that's why you're not going to often see products, in connection with serial murders or in horror movies or, those kind of negative movies, slasher movies. It's harder to do that. I mean, they get free stuff, don't take me wrong. We always, I don't do these movies, but we always get free waters for, when we do movies where people die. So there's always something that you can integrate, but it is a conversation that you have very early on.
Can I have a follow-up? So my impression is that this type of conversation that you're describing, it's a conversation that you have after you have a relationship with these companies, because they have some way to establish who you are, right? But if you're a new producer, it becomes like you kind of need to bring the entire thing to them and say, hey, this is what we have. What are your thoughts?
In this situation where you are right now, I don't see, I think it is perfectly fine to, for example, send an email to Beverly and say, I saw your interview in Jeanette's class. It was amazing. I was very impressed. Would you be open for me to stopping by at your office to talk about a project that I'm working on? That would be an in. Spark Alliance is a big company that does this every day. So it's just a matter of how you approach them. I'm not gonna say it's easy, but when we started with our Global Beauty Masters show, Jim and I for sure had no idea about marketing anything. But we went to them and we said, we're doing this Project Runway like show, and the product is going to be integrated. And I always say to them, we're working on the financing, that's pretty close, even though, what does pretty close actually mean? I'm the financier, so I can say that. But we can say things like, yeah, we're working on the financing and we have some interest. It's not lying. I'm interested, so you're not lying. So sometimes it's how you approach them that opens the door. Like with everything, we all have to sell ourselves a little bit. And when we start out, I started out at some point, I had to sell myself with something. You have to just figure out what is the easiest in for me in this situation. Like in this situation, I think you guys should consider, not everyone at once, but not all 60 of you are going to call Devery tomorrow. The point is, you can consider saying, we understand there are some certain requirements you need. We just want to find out, what you need so that we can get you what you need. So what she might say to you is, I might be happy to take a look, but I'm going to probably need to know where this thing is going to air and when it's going to air. And you always have the option, when you learn about this, to do with nothing flies, a buy-on deal, and then have the brands pay for it. You can buy your time in a network, and then you know when it's going to run, where it's going to run, how it's going to run, and let the brand pay for it. if all fails, for TV shows, for example, and why not? I mean, the point is, they need questions answered. Some of them you can answer right now, and some of them that you can answer later. And they know that you don't always have the question right then and there available. So I would not be too discouraged to approach them also, because they are looking for people to work with, especially when it's a good project.
Also,
Yeah.
if you're flexible and maybe willing to work with them, they may go, well, I don't know if the way your character is using the product is great for us. Could they do this? And if it's possible to do that, then you may have a relationship happening.
Right. The relationship is only difficult. And I'm not even going to say difficult. I would say the relationship is only hard one time. The first time you call them, and then you have a relationship with them, and then the next one's going to be easy. But the first time you might either go through an advertising agency, or you go through a product placement agency that has done this successfully. So you're going with the right people. But I would still contact the marketing people at the brand anyway and say, put this movie together. It's a very positive movie. Here's the message which aligns with your brand. We have distribution partners standing by. We'd like to have a conversation. These are the things they want to hear. And then why wouldn't they talk to you? They need people to take their brand and show it to the world. I mean, that's just what they need, because they want to make sales. Right? So it's a question of how you approach them now.
And can I have one last one?
Yeah, no last, just ask on.
So in terms of how much oversight do you have from the brand or from the advertisement company on the product or the placement, right? How is that verified? Because like I've worked on environments where it's insane and absurd the amount of obsession that happens. So from the creative side, how is that handled? I guess
So
that's
the way you handle it is through the contract, right? You want to make sure that the contract spells out exactly how the product is to be shown. Because they will show up on set and they're going to annoy the shit out of you. You're absolutely right. But the way I do it is I always push back and say, first of all, don't walk into the shot, go over there to the catering area and let's have a conversation. Because what they would do is they run right in the shot. It should be like this. What are you doing? So this is how crazy it gets, because they don't know. So, I mean, they should know. But sometimes you have crazy people there. I'm going to send some assistant from them. Anyway, you have a conversation on the sideline and you can remind them if they go, and it's crazy on you that, there is a contract and you will live up to the contract in the way you're going to handle the product. This is the last thing I would say. But in the beginning, you can always say, well, let me look into it, talk to the director if they are willing to do this extra thing you want, because I always want extra stuff. That's really what the conversation is.
But I will say that in my experience, advertising and marketing people are less annoying than executives from the studios and the networks.
Okay. That is certain. You don't want them to show up.
That's for
That's
sure.
why we independently finance, so we don't have to have them show up. Because
that makes me worry about the studio execs then.
Exactly. Oh my
Way
God.
more.
Yeah, Carol, do you have a question?
Thank you.
Yes, I do. So, oops, is it on? Yep. So how does the producer determine how much they're charging the brand, or like how does the brand decide how much they want to sponsor the project? Is it based on like the sort of like duration of like exposure in that movie or series, or is it based on valuation of the brands, et cetera, et cetera?
Right. It's based on what is the movie and what is the exposure going to be, or what is it planned, right? But I would say, I mean, I've seen sponsorship deals. I mean, if it's a movie that's theatrically released, the numbers go up in the six figures and up, for sure. If it's a movie where we don't know if it's theatrically released or it's a TV, it usually, I mean, the highest deal, I think, if I'm not wrong, Jim, for our independent product, I think we have gotten as much as $1.5 million for a movie on one deal with one brand. And that was a 50.
Well, like on Global Beauty, I was going to say on Global Beauty Masters, what we did is that, like, one brand gave us $250,000, and for that they had one of their experts be a mentor in a challenge. We were using their products in the challenge, and then right after the challenge ended, we went to commercial. They had a commercial spot, and then their product was in the commercial, and so that cost them $250,000. And but that was a lot of exposure in one episode of a show.
So we work in a global diagnosis, we got deals as little as 25,000, as high as 500,000 from a brand, depending on how we integrated them. And that was a reality television series. For a film, it's usually more than that. So, but it depends on what you do with the brand and who the brand is, and how you're exposing them, and in how many scenes they're in, and what the value is for them. So I think it's something to talk to them about, to see, kind of testing the waters. How much would you pay for this kind of conversation? Because I
Yeah.
have with laws about this. Honestly, there's no like, should be this much or this percentage of the budget. When I do my finance plan, I usually calculate about 5% of the budget to come from some kind of sponsorship. Right? Between 5 and 15% of the budget can happen. That's not uncommon. But above that, I think for a movie that doesn't have a studio release, I think would be not very realistic.
Got it, got it.
Yeah.
Do you usually,
Yeah.
and do you usually take only one brand per movie, or you take multiple ones?
Take a multiple ones. One thing you have to remember though is you can't have competing brands.
Mhm.
So you can't have, one brand saying, I'm going to be a phone company XYZ, and then the other one, another phone company with another.
Yeah.
So if you have competing brands and their brands don't like that, that's kind of an unwritten rule. You don't want competitors in there. So if you have a brand, you need one for the sector. So if you're saying, I'm going to do a phone company, there's one phone company brand. If you're saying, I'm going to do a credit card, if you do clothing men, female clothing, whatever it is, one. You pick one per category is what I'm trying to say. And you don't use the competitor for the same category, even, if that's possible. I would be careful with that. They just don't like it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. I've never had that. You guys are great class of great questions. I'm having really fun with this. Yes, Dom?
Hi again, Jeanette. The thought of like knowing how much to get from a sponsor, it's something we were talking about in Randy's class last week as well, like brand integration. Is there any kind of database you can look at to find how much brands have paid for certain products in the past?
We are a database. Like, it's the same that you will never know what a movie has generated in licensing revenues. You will likely never know in finding out what they have generated in branding.
So I couldn't look up how much Reese's paid for ET. That's
Because
no?
it's confidential information. It's a
Right.
business.
Okay.
So, don't share. It's stupid because I would want to know.
So it'd be awesome to know. Yeah. Even just for fan,
Yeah. You also have to think about the fact that these brands get hit up all the time. So you really have to have something that's going to really intrigue them, because they get hit up by the biggest movies and the biggest TV series first, and then they come down to our little indies. And so you really have to have something that's going to get them excited.
Sure. Okay. Fair enough.
So,
On the talk of database, you mentioned earlier tax credits do have a database. Can you reiterate or repeat?
there's this website.
Yeah, the website rather.
The website, let me just put that in the chat here.
Thanks.
I want to see it's in the middle. Try this one, see if it leads you to entertainment partners.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of
Sure.
course. So what do we have on the slide that I didn't talk about? Yeah, they want to do this because they have decreasing revenues from advertising. Fewer commercials available that get eyeballs connected to their brands. They're looking for new opportunities. And want to have relationship with content creators because of that. So I think we covered most of this. Oh yeah, our audience. Let's talk about that for a moment. There's two things that happen. One is the brand wants an audience they don't have yet that they want to break into. So sometimes when we look for brands, we know, okay, this is a women's product brand, so we're going to put her in the movie because the movie is a romantic comedy, mostly reaching women. That's okay. But let's say this women's product company is now developing a, perfume for men. I'm just coming up with something stupid. And they're not usually in that market. It's not usually their market, which is why they want to expand. So there can sometimes what happens is we're hitting a market with them where oftentimes we don't even know. We can help them expand their reach into an audience that they have not normally expanded into with their product. So both of these things can happen. could be targeted audience because the brand always reaches this audience and wants this audience, or it could be that we're offering them an audience that they want to just, that they happen to want to reach, that they haven't done so. So those things that happen, that's why it's important that we define the audience for them, so that they know our movie is supposed to reach women age group of this and this, or families age group of that and that, so they can understand what we're trying to do with the movie. And we'd already talked about the buy on components, buying onto networks, if that's what we want to do. So there are some genres that make sense and some that don't make sense. So for example, ideally, the best brand integration happens when you have a movie that takes place right now, like present day movie. We're using stuff, they're selling stuff, easy peasy. When we have a sci-fi, if it's near future, we can still do deals with things like the next model of BMW, the next model of a phone, the next model of eyeglasses, the next model of a watch that looks very sci-fi-y. So we just have to be very particular, what brand do we approach with our sci-fi and how far in the future are we? And will that fit? Same example when we go, for example, one thing I did is the series I Roll. Was it I Roll or the movie that was? The special car was a concept that was developed with and for this show. So there are things where sometimes even the brand says, well, we have this special development that we're doing, we would like to adjust it depending on how it's being used. So even that happens. So there's even sometimes design conversation happening based on the movie that you're doing where they get inspired. Those things happen sometimes. But point is, when you have period pieces, you can really only work with brands that have been around at that time. The example here made with Don Draper's whiskey choice in Mad Men, where I don't even remember what whiskey he was drinking, but he was drinking alcohol, he was drinking a whiskey that existed, even in the 60s. So when we go back in time and we have period pieces, we obviously would talk to brands that have a product that is that old. Like it's a really old whiskey, it's a really old, maybe it's an old timer car, still from BMW. So we just have to be sensible about what a movie's timing is and what product would fit. I mean, it sounds logical, but some people are like, what? Really didn't think about it that way. Easy to integrate products we have found is food and beverage, electronics, vehicles, apparel, and then also locations. What do you do? How can we, oops, I missed this one. Locations, we oftentimes have situations where we feature certain locations, like certain hotels, certain places, where they get an advertising component out of it because we're featuring them. Or it could be that, like with White Lotus, the 4-star hotel, the Four Seasons in Maui was not named as it, but they gave them the hotel for a lot less, if not, I don't think they didn't charge anything, but there was a lot less. Now it did help that it, was shot in the pandemic and no one was traveling anyway. But the point is, there are locations that you can get where you don't have to pay anything or where they pay you if you feature them. And then you find that personal hygiene projects are also, and cleaning projects are also things that are fairly integrate to include like cosmetics, etc. So those are the things that we have done that would make sense. Yes, Jim?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just want to tell you one story that happened on Dog Whisperer. So season 4 or 5, we got approached by Procter & Gamble. They wanted Caesar to do Swiffer ads because they had a Swiffer that would help clean up dog hair. And the mistake we initially made is they submitted the copy because this is the copy they wanted. And when Caesar would read it, the audience thought, this sounds like an ad. This doesn't sound like him. And the audience got upset. And then we redid it so that Caesar just spoke about the way he used, because he did use Swiffers. So he just talked about it the way he used them and the way he talked in the show. And then the audience was fine with it. So you have to also be careful how the messaging is done.
Yeah, very true. That is very true. And the connection to the main character is always essential. Yes, Howell?
Super tactical question, but I can imagine that if you have a few products and you have like shampoos or these smaller items, do you have something on the crew who is like an assistant AD for branding and okay, yeah,
Yeah,
that
usually it's handled by the prop department, but we have people that watch just that.
but
Even when we have a lot of brands in a movie, we have a specialty brand, I would call it a brand manager, but someone doesn't just make sure that this thing shows up in the shot the way it's supposed to, but also deals with the brand and make sure they're happy. So we hire
Yeah.
people for that, for productions.
makes sense. Thank you.
Because you can get lost. I mean, it happened to me on the movie that I did with Adrian Brody for Whitaker in Iowa. We were supposed to have Heineken in there. And so I'm telling this guy, I said, Adrian, just turn the bottle. You know, it was on the bar and he was always turn the bottle away so we didn't see the logo. And I mean, it's like 15 times, turn the bottle. I had to actually do this because we didn't hire someone. And thank God I saw it because it's like, oh my God, otherwise it becomes a post-production job for me and I really don't want to spend money on this. So it is as tedious as telling the actor, damn, hold the bottle the right way, damn it. So you're right, Raul, it's a bit annoying. So it is good when you have a larger production with a lot of product to have someone just pay attention to the integration, how it's supposed to be done, and that we see it on screen.
Yeah, makes sense. I would hire someone. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, and they don't cost that much, but it's good to have them just focus on it.
Mhm.
So we want to make sure that when we talk to, in the end of the day, the brands, of course, want to make sure we have some kind of US distribution that will tell them how the movie or the show is being seen. The brand does want us to have a concept that meets the brand's requirement in regards to the overall message and the broad product integration into the story. The producer should understand what organic integration and authentic integration looks like and should make sure it's not just product placement. The producer should be open to changing the script to align with the brand's message and provide support in regards to the integration. They should integrate it in a way that it meets network standards and practices. Jim, you want to talk about that?
Yes. So what happens is,
Today's
well, there's a couple different things because American networks are a little bit more lenient about the way products are integrated than some foreign networks. Because in Europe and other places, they look at the hawking of brands inside an entertainment project as like bad form or bad taste, where we're very used to it in America. And it's not like they're not used to it in some shows overseas, but there's a very fine line between this product is being used inherently in a drama or a comedy show in a way that makes sense versus this looks like a product placement. And that's they really, and Jeanette, you kind of know more which countries are like
Yeah.
France, I think really doesn't like it. There's some
So
other,
we have some countries in general in Europe where if it's too much product, they get turned off. So the organic integration becomes even more important for them. So if they see there's product, but it's organically integrated, they can kind of live with it. But if it's too much and constantly, they say it's just too much. So sometimes what we do, if it gets too intense, we actually, in order to make a deal happen, post-produce and take logos out for that
yeah.
particular country.
You may have to do a slight re-edit of the project to get it approved.
But there's another thing, Jim, with products that with a network. Remember when we had an exchange with the network that said, don't you dare go to our brands? Remember that conversation? When they were not happy when we were going and they thought we were pushing their brands. You know
Oh
this?
yeah.
You want to talk about that?
Well, there, it's funny because everybody's possessive. So what happened was on Dog Whisperer, we found an advertiser who wanted to advertise that we found, and the National Geographic ad salespeople got super pissed off, going, "How dare you, go to these people?" Like, well, wait a minute, they've never advertised on the show. We found them and brought them to you. We're not going to make the money. They're going to pay you. We're not getting anything out of this. But they're very territorial about, ad sales. In the same way, PR people are very territorial and marketing people are very territorial. And I always have tried to work with them and say, look, we're on the same team. We all want the same thing. We want the biggest audience for our show. We want the most people to see this. So I'm happy to work with you and work with inside your guidelines. but there are some things you aren't thinking about. You know, we know our project better than anybody, but a lot of times the people at the studios and the streamers and the networks, they think they know better, and they don't want you touching their clients, even if they never touched them. That was the irony. It's not like we went to Coca-Cola. We went to it was a dog, I forget, it was a dog vitamin company that had never advertised on television. And we were the first place they advertised. And they got mad at us for finding them a sponsor.
So there's a lot of how do I say this, politics, you know, you kind of schmooze around and deal with. And so when you work with the network, especially when you do the buy-on version of things, which I think we should mention as well, Jim, there are certain advertisers that maybe the network doesn't want us to work with. So these are things that it doesn't happen often, but you know, you need to be sensitive to the very people that will air your product, will air your show in regards to their feelings about the brand or how this brand is being shown. So the worst that can happen is that you have to go into the editing room and you have to, you know, post out some logos. That's the worst that can happen if that conversation didn't take place.
We've also had situations where the brand wanted to participate in a show, but their advertising agency talked them out of it because the advertising agency wasn't going to get a commission because you went around the advertising agency. And sometimes if you go to the advertising agency, they'll just kill it before it even gets to the brand. So there's a lot of, as Jeanette says, there's a lot of politics, and it varies from brand to brand. You just kind of won't know till you're dealing with them.
Yeah, but dealing with them is good because you learn. Now, there is a little trick with the advertising agencies, and when the brand will say to you, we are interested, but we'd like you to deal with our advertising agency, the key with the advertising agency is to know early on that you'll pay them something. So make them, that's why in all my finance plans, I put in 15% to go to the advertising agency. I don't necessarily have to pay 15% all the time, but I do offer that I would pay them so that they are on my side and that they also make money. So that's something for you to think about, even if they didn't do anything. Sometimes the advertising agency is the very entity that gets you the deal, but sometimes it's the entity that's being put on the deal by the brand. And in both cases, I think it is smart to say to them early on, we'd be happy to pay you a percentage of whatever the brand is paying because we value your time in working with us on this content.
And your expertise, because you know the
Yes.
brand very well.
Correct. So let's see if I'm missing anything. We talked about distribution. We talked about standard network and practices. Cross promotion, obviously, we benefit, and so do they, the brands, from the wide distribution of the film or the TV show that we're making, plus them when they advertise their product showing our content. In the end of the deal, we have to show the brand how our integration will increase their sales numbers. So we have to really think about what we think could make sense. And that is why it doesn't hurt to have someone on your team that does this, like Spark Alliance or a product placement agency, even just to have them as a consulting, if you don't, even if you don't do the deal with them, just to give you pointers on what they would do in a marketing concept for a brand to make the brand interested in this deal. So you can hire a consultant to help you with that. Just, you know, make sure it makes sense, because if you make a movie that's, you know, $100,000, you don't want to pay a consultant $50,000. So that's not ideal. So when we do sponsorships, we do them because they are non-recoupable finance sources in our waterfall. They do not recoup from the distribution revenues that we pay people with. That's the main thing. The buy-on concept is something that we can use even though we don't get a license fee from the US to do this. It will elevate our value in the international marketplace, as I mentioned earlier, but we can get revenues from commercial spots because we're going to have some commercial spot in the time that we're buying. The advantage is that we will fully control the content that is aired if we do the buy-on version of things. They don't have any editing rights. They don't have any opinions. They can't tell us what to do and not to do, as long as we don't show naked people in our show, which is not something that standard network practices will adhere to. So as long as we adhere to the standard practices that the network will put onto us, and technical requirements, and don't show people heads being shot up and things like that. Whatever the network requires, we have to do on the content front. But they're not going to tell us re-edit this scene or change this script. None of that will apply. And of course, we want to make sure that the brand appreciates the aligned interest as much as we do when we work with them. It is advisable to let them know how we release the film and the air date. We talked about this. We want to make sure that our product, that our film is a high quality product and doesn't end up being a 90-minute commercial for the brand. They don't know this. And we already talked about the fact that we want the brand to be able to increase their sales.
And you can use the brand to give them clips of the project, promotional clips. They can put on their social media. A lot of these brands have millions and millions of followers, and you can use a clip that has their product or a clip that doesn't have their product, just that they're supportive of the project. And again, you're increasing the potential audience, and they're showing their audience a different side of their own brand.
Right. Thank you for that. So let's talk about music investments. The way music investments are used is that they cover a certain budgeted line item component that is associated with the music budget. So we're talking about music editing, we're talking about music supervision, we're talking about paying composers, we're talking about maybe recording a song, we're talking about paying producers for recording a song. So any cost connected, maybe even license fees for a song that we have to license that will not become part of the deal with the music publisher, but is still a fee that we have to pay for. So this is what we use the music investment for. So when the music investor gives us money for music, they want to know things like who's the composer, who's the music supervisor, because the music supervisor is important for them to put the music cue sheet together, which will help the music investment company to manage the royalties that will come back through the various music royalty companies like BMI, ASCAP, etc. So the music supervisor is someone that they would like to see being someone who has experience, and ideally they know them. What I do is I just ask them, who do you want me to hire? Do you have someone? And then I'll just hire whoever that person is, because it doesn't matter to me. Unless, I make friends tomorrow with an amazing music supervisor, it's okay. So those are things that make them feel very comfortable. If I tell them that, tell me who you want as a music supervisor, I hire them, no problem. Where I'm not going to let them tell me what to do is the composer, and I'm not going to let them tell me what to do when it comes to how I integrate music and what music I integrate. They might ask, they might say things, well, this music composer is better than this music composer. You should have this person versus that person because we can sell them better. I can say, thank you for this information, but no, thank you. Because that's a conversation I have with my director. That is a creative component in regards to the movie that I will not let them participate in. And you don't need to either. That doesn't mean that they're not going to ask. They might ask. So when we put music in films and these, music pieces are shown, for example, in a commercial that the brand will show with our movie because we did a brand deal. They like this because then they see, oh my God, the music goes out, there's a global reach. They get excited about that stuff. And then when they see we have a strong sales agent who sells great movies that have Academy Award nominations or got Academy Awards, they get excited about that too. So the more excited they are, the more money they'll give us. But again, we don't want them to have any creative approval for anything relating music in our film. They do want films that have music. That would be logical. When you say to them, even though you tell them, I'm not going to tell you how much music I'm going to put in the movie and what the screen time is for the score, because I don't know. We have to make the movie first. And then it's also the director who has an opinion. Obviously, they want more scoring and more music, and we want what is good for the movie. So we may have the final call on this. We can listen to their thoughts and suggestions, but they're not going to tell us what to do on that one. So what they're doing in essence is they acquire the music publishing rights and recoup from music royalties in connection with those publishing rights. And they manage those revenues by managing the cue sheets and monitoring what the agencies, BMI, ASCAP, and GEMA, these are just three that come to mind that handle music royalties, will do. So when they issue checks, because the movies are shown in different countries, on different platforms, those checks go to the music investor. They will not come to us. Any questions about, yeah, Mashka, go ahead.
So I was wondering if, like, are these specifically, would a company be interested in this specifically if there was music like songs, you know, like with words in them, or in the film, or would they also be interested if it was just like kind of the background kind of
All of it.
ambient mood music,
All of it, all of it. They like any kind of music because it is music that you do get paid for. The
Yeah.
only music you don't get paid for is music that is not yours. Like if you license a Beyonce song, obviously,
Yeah.
that's you know, if you do too much of that, they're not going to be happy because they can't make money. But other
So
than
for-
that, no
Yeah.
problem.
So for example, like if I want to do a period piece, and like obviously there would be music in it, but
Yes.
not necessarily like pop music.
Pop song, exactly. They're
Yeah.
fine with that.
Would that still be an option?
Mhm, mhm. Absolutely, because even those scores get paid for. And they get paid for by time that they're playing on a network station. That's how that works. That's how the
Oh, I
royalties work.
see. Got it. Got it. And
That's how
that
the
comes from the distributor pays that, right? Not,
Correct. The distributor pays that.
okay. Sorry, my cat is here.
Cat is adorable. Yes, correct. That is absolutely correct. Great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we're going back to money. This was a nice conversation, but let's go back to financing. So all these things, you know, obviously are important in regards to balancing our financing sources. And I believe we looked at a similar sheet here where we said in the ideal world, we have a project, film or television, doesn't matter, that has projections for the international distribution revenues somewhere between 70 to 75 at the low level of the budget, that is. Want to make sure we understand. We also say in the ideal world, we want to see about a third of the budget pre-sold. In the ideal world, we want to see 20% production subsidies, which, by the way, this 20% is a non-recoupable finance source that can be comprised of incentives, music investment, brand integration, in-kind services. Because all of those non-recoupable finance sources can find their application in that number. As long as you're at 20% at minimum, you'll be fine. Gap loans are usually somewhere between 10 and 20% of the budget. Mezzanine loans will be somewhere between 5 and 10% of the budget if we want to be safe. And the equity investment is usually around a third of the budget or a little more. It can be half the budget or 55% if we don't have a gap loan and the investor takes that position. Now the problem, or maybe not, but there is adjustments that take place anytime something is not that. We don't have our minimum sales estimates being 70 to 75%. We don't get all the pre-sales. We don't get the gap loan. We have no gap loan, or we have some, very little. We don't have a mezzanine lender, and we maybe don't have enough equity. So whatever the situation might be, we need to adjust. Adjustments can come from sales estimates that don't reach their minimum. Pre-sales I just mentioned, but it can also be that our product is something that makes more sense in the US because it's as I always mention, sports movies, because they work great in the US, not necessarily internationally, but they could make a great, you know, could be Netflix paying me 50% of the budget. I don't care if my sales estimates are only 50% then, because I just got 50% out of a territory that I thought would maybe give me 35% in the US. So we have to be also conscious about the genre that we're producing and the story that we're producing and the marketplace that could be domestically driven and not internationally driven. We should look at, and we talked about this today in depth, at production locations where we can get more incentives if some of these numbers do not work. And we want to be adding non-recoupable finance sources anytime we're running into problems on the level of estimates and potentially pre-sales. This is when non-recoupable finance sources come in. But I want you to look at a waterfall that also is essential for you to look at to understand how we need to balance the waterfall in order to reach profits. Yes, Mashka?
Sorry, that was an accident.
Oh, okay. So we had a basic waterfall that we looked at last week, which was basically showing us distribution revenues come in, going to pay the loan off first, being the senior loan, then they're going to pay the junior loan, then they're going to pay deferments, and then they're going to pay the equity, and then they're going to pay the profits. But there are more people that need to be paid from the waterfall, especially also when we, for example, have a theatrical release. When we have a theatrical release, we have what is called P&L. Someone needs to pay for the release campaign of our movie, and that someone would like to be paid back. In a situation where a movie is theatrically released, they are what we refer to last money in, first money out. They are the ones that give us the money to release a movie in the US, in the theaters, and create the marketing campaign, so they pay for the P&A. And when the movie then generates box office, that box office will go straight to them, including the premium that they get, and they get anywhere from 20 to 25% for their money. So that will have to pay first before anyone sees anything, even the bank. So that's new. We have not had that before. I want you to be aware of that. So this will be a P&A investor, but it could also be a studio that licenses the film or releases the film, or a distributor. The same applies for them. So it is money that has to do with the theatrical release only. So this will not be applicable if we don't have a film that's theatrically released. The collection agent is someone who would be paid from distribution revenues that hit the collection account, distribution revenues that are paid into the collection account. And as we talked about, the senior loan could actually take that position number 2, if they require to be paid directly from the distributors before the collection agent is paid. This happens quite a bit. Position 2 and 3 will therefore be interchangeable. So it could very well be that the senior lender wants the money. And you are not sad when that happens, because if the bank loan gets paid first directly from distributors, and that money never goes into the collection account, you don't have to pay that 1% on that portion of that money. So you're actually saving money. So that's good. The sales agency fee and distribution expenses would be paid in the 4th position behind the senior loan, or behind the senior loan and the collection agent. The collection agent is always in front of the sales agent. The sales agent comes after those two have been paid. And they get their sales agency fee plus expenses. And those are either a percentage of the sales that they generated, meaning both the sales agency fee and the distribution expenses are a percentage of the sales of the distribution revenues that are being generated. And what I do with my distribution expenses, I cap them. So the sales agent will say to me, I'm going to charge you 5% in expenses and 15% in a sales fee. I would say to them, well, I'll pay you 2% expenses and I'll cap it at $20,000. So after that, no more distribution expenses. So for you, that's important to remember too. Those distribution expenses are often cappable, so that you don't keep on paying every time, money comes in, you automatically pay them another 2 to 5%. You don't need to do that. The junior loan will recoup in position 5 with the premium if applicable. So this lender may or may not require premium payment. Some do, some don't. And remember that if they ask for interest to be paid up front to them, they should not be getting a premium as well. So it's one or the other. So make sure that that happens. They will always recoup behind the senior loan, and they will always be before the equity. That's a golden rule. And now we have deferments. Because deferments and the premium of the deferments are what we consider production cost, most equity investors will be fine having the deferments paid before the equity is paid. However, some may not be. Some may say to you, I don't care about your deferments. I don't care about any of that. No one's getting in front of me. I already have the sales agent, the junior lender, the senior lender, the collection agent, the P&A. I'm done. I'm not letting you have more people in front of me. This could happen. So therefore, the deferment position 6 could become 7 and equity could become 6 if that is the case. Profit participation is always after the equity and the premium in connection to the equity has been paid. That's very important. No one gets paid any profits before all of these people from position 1 to position 7 have been paid. In this profit participation component, the producer profits are actually a part of that. I'm making it a position 7 just to show, there is producer profits because we always talk about them in the end, but they are part of the profit participation. So they are a percentage that is basically the balance of what is available after the other profit participants have been paid. Now let's look at the exclusivity of the corridors for a moment. While the P&A investor is paid, no one else gets paid. They have an exclusive recoupment corridor. No one gets paid, no one gets paid anything. When the collection agent gets paid, no one gets paid anything. The collection agent has an exclusive recoupment corridor. Same for the senior lender, same for the sales agent, same for the junior lender. Now the deferments, that corridor can be shared because it could be that we have more than one person that asks for deferments and that we're paying deferments to. So that's a corridor, that's a shared corridor. The same could happen for the equity because we might not just have one Jeanette paying equity. It might just be Jeanette and Dom and Raul. We're throwing money together and we'll all become equity investors. In that case, this exclusive corridor is being shared between the three of us. Profit participation does not have an exclusive corridor. Everyone shares, and the same for producer profits, obviously, because we're part of profit participation. Do you have any questions about this? Because, yeah, Raul, go.
Of questions. So, number one, the call out that you have regarding the guild, SAG-AFTRA, and so on, I thought that came in position 2 after the P&A, but you're saying that the guild residuals are paid by the distributor?
Yes, they are. Thank you for this question. So depending on how you deal with the guilds and who you assign residuals to in terms of distributors, we, the producer, have to pay for them. I've actually had one movie because I just didn't know where I ended up paying residuals and I paid them after the senior loan, before the
But
right?
normally, you would
That's what
hope.
that's what it normally is. The bank will not allow you to pay anything before them.
Okay, so it would be in 2.5
It would be
after.
3.5. It would be actually 3.5,
So,
potentially even 4.5.
okay,
Because
after the senior loan, after the bank.
yes, correct.
So how does it work if it is paid by the distributor then? Because in that case, they are kind of jumping ahead.
No, the distributor takes on the responsibility. So when I say I assign the royalties, the guild residuals to the distributor, that's something that's often done because it is in fact the distributor's job to pay residuals because they are the one releasing the film, and residuals are generated through revenues from releases that they make. So it is their job to pay residuals. But when my lawyer took a nap, like in this case, and didn't put it in the distribution agreement, that my distributor in that case is responsible for these residuals, and I didn't know it, so I didn't catch it, I ended up paying the residuals on my first movie. The movie that I did with Timothy Dalton and Nastassja Kinski, I ended up paying residuals. Thank God it wasn't that much, but I did. Because I didn't pay attention. I just didn't know. Like you, I'm like, residuals, what? Why? So the job is, we need to remember, it's not our job. It is the distributor's job to pay the guild residuals.
Thank you.
Yeah?
Okay.
Great question. Thank you for that.
The,
So,
the,
yeah, go ahead.
the second part is for the junior loan, you mentioned that the premium is not paid if it is offered, if it is paid upfront. Could you repeat that,
It's
Clary?
the interest. So there are two things. There's interest payments and there's premium payments. Interest payment is a payment that you pay in advance because you have to pay interest to someone who gives you a loan. You pay that in advance. A premium is always paid out of the waterfall. That's the difference between the two. So a premium means I am paying a percentage of this investment on top, and it's paid from the waterfall. Interest means I'm paying a percentage of the loan amount up front, and they're deducting it from my loan amount, and I get the loan amount given to me minus the interest reserve that they charge.
Okay,
Yeah?
thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So we're going to talk about some balancing option. We did a little bit last time, but I'm going to look at two options here that I'd like to run by you. Everything has to do with pretty much what happens if I don't make enough projections. What happens if I don't make enough money? That's really what it comes down to. Because if my sales projections are lower, it also translates to I'm not going to generate enough distribution revenues. That's exactly what it translates to. So anytime I have low projections, I need to balance my finance plan a little bit because it impacts me. In this case, I'm going to even combine this with, I have low projections in option 2. Instead of 75% of the budget, which is what I want, I only have 65% of the budget projected to be generated from international distribution revenues. In option 3, I have projected only 50% of the budget to be generated through international distribution revenues. So my movie is really only worth 50% of the budget internationally. The US is the same for all of them because I don't have a product that is particularly strong in the US, so I can't filter or I can't make up the missing percentages that I'm not getting from the international marketplace. I'm simply just making less money. On top of it, my pre-sales are reduced in both cases by 10%. So I am already seeing I'm not making enough pre-sales, I'm not making enough distribution revenues. Will I even make money, and how do I deal with this? So I created a finance plan. Option 1, with everything is the way it's supposed to, looks like this. We have a finance plan here, $10 million, just so it's easy math. It could also be 5 million, 3 million, the percentages won't change. So in this case, we have the normal finance plan where we have 75% coming from the international, 35% from the US distribution. We're going to pre-sell 35% of the budget. We're going to have these distributors give us the first payment, which is 20% of our pre-sales. That is 700,000. So that's the first money we get. And that will be sitting with the sales agent, as you've learned before, until all the money has been raised and we can start producing the movie. That's when we get the 700,000 released to us. So then we're looking at the pre-sale loan here. When we're deducting the down payment from the pre-sales, the pre-sale value is 2.8 million. That's what the bank looks at in order for it to lend us money for pre-sales, because it's not giving us the 20% down payment because we already received it. In this case, we're looking at how much gap should we be getting. The gap loan is driven by the unsold rights. What are the unsold rights? We're taking the 3.5 million that we have pre-sold. We're deducting that from the 7.5 million international, which will leave us with 4 million to sell international. Why are we only looking at the international numbers? Do you guys remember? Dom, do you remember?
From the volatility of the US market, it's unpredictable. We can't bank on that.
Correct. Thank you. Yay! I'm such a great teacher. I like it. Thank you. Sorry, I had to ask someone because you guys are falling asleep and I don't blame you. So that's why we're only going by the international rights. That's it. That's all we care about when it comes to the bank. The bank will say you have $4 million in unsold rights. Great. We'll give you half of that because we're the bank and we're stingy and we don't know if you're going to sell the entire 4 million or not. We believe you could potentially only sell 2 million. So we're only giving you 2 million. The bank then will look at the pre-sale loan of 2.8 million, the gap loan of 2 million. Together, it's 4.8 million as the senior loan, charge us 12% interest up front, leaving us with 4,224,000 as the loan amount. So far, so good. In this case, we have 20% incentives. 20% of the budget is $2 million. We have 120 dB giving us a loan. They're charging 15% to do this. So we're left with 1,700,000 from the incentive. We get 5% brand integration. Okay. the agency is getting 15% because we're being nice. So we get 525,000. By the way, this, in some cases, could be moved to the waterfall as a revenue component, because brand integration may say to us, we're not paying you up front, screw you. We're going to pay you when the movie's finished. So this component could become a revenue component, just to let you know. In this case, it's not, we're putting it in we're putting it in the financing structure. So what that means is we need to have 30% equity in order to finance our film. So all is well. The recoupment looks like this. We're getting all the money. We're getting 10,300,000. Raul, why are we only getting 10,300,000 and not 11 million from revenues?
Not sure. Because you got the down payment before.
Thank you. He's awake. We love it.
Yeah.
So 10,300,000 land in the collection account. We pay the collection agent first, 1%, 103,000. We pay the sales agent, distribute a sales fee and distribution fee altogether, 15% of the entire revenues, in this case, of the 11 million. We're paying the senior loan back now, the amount that includes the interest, which was 4.8 million. We're paying the equity back, and we're paying the equity premium. So the net revenues, if we pay everyone back, is 205,800, if I calculated this correctly, which I hope I am. So then we have people getting money. We now have a talent pool, meaning we have some actors, we're giving them some points, they get 25% altogether. That is 25% of 205,800. The investor gets 15%. Why does the investor get 15%, Janessa? Janessa. Why does the equity investor get a 15% profit?
I don't know.
Okay, good thing I asked. So let's go back. Janessa, what is the equity investor's percentage of the budget that they're financing?
Does that say 30?
Yes, ma'am. And why are they getting 15? You don't remember, that's fine. I'm not gonna bug you. They're getting 15, don't worry, because they always get 50% of the amount they invested in relation to the budget. So Janessa, if they would have given me 50% here, 50% of the budget, right? If the equity investor would be 50% instead of 30%, they would be getting 25% profits, because 50% of, yeah, you get it. So that's why 15. I know other people have the same questions. I just picked you because I know the questions. So sorry, I made you wake up on that one. So then we have
No,
some.
it's okay. I appreciate it, because some of these things I'm not totally sure on.
I
So
know. That's why we're doing this. It's perfectly fine. And and I do this sometimes fast, and then people afterwards email me and saying, how did this go again? So that's why at this stage, we're now in week 4, I can ask you some questions because we've done it once or twice, right? And if you don't know, that's even better, because that gives me a chance to explain it to, I know, 59 other people that may not know the answer either. All is well. Thank you for that. Someone had their hand up earlier, and I forgot who it was.
No, it was just me to say that it was half of the investment bits.
Thank you, Maureen. Thank you so
Yeah,
much. Appreciate
sorry.
it. No, it's good. I like you. If you guys have answers, yes, put your hands up. We're like in school. Hello, I know the answer. All is well. So the co-producers, sometimes we have co-producers that help us do things. Find money, find a sales agent, find cast, find a deal, do something. And sometimes we make them give them profit participation because they helped us get a movie made. So in this case, I decided we have someone who helped us with something, we're giving them 5%. So altogether, we're giving to these people 45%, which leaves us with 55% as the producer. So this is kind of where we are. How do we get to the ROI for the investor? Do you guys know how we got to the ROI of 620,566 for the investor? Can someone help me with that one? Raul, or Dom, both, either or. Raul, go, you were first.
So it's a 15% that the investor gets paid plus the amount that they put before. in
So
equity.
basically, it is the premium of 20%, right? Plus the profit participation of 15%,
Oh, sorry.
right?
Yes.
And that's how, and the investor gave us, let's look back here, they gave us $2,951,000. And on that money, they're making 620,566. And if I divide this number through the investment, I get to an ROI of 21%. Yeah, clear so far? Right. We want this ROI to be above 20%. Otherwise, we're screwing up. Just FYI. That would be good. Nothing under 20 is allowed on any of your finance plans. Okay? Just FYI. So now we're going to go.
I can ask something here, Jeanette.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because it came up for me during the extra credit. Would you count both of those numbers as the total profit, or is it just the profits that we generate for as producers?
No, we are producers and we get our profits.
Yeah.
The investor is the investor and they get their profits. I separate the two.
Sure.
Why do I do this? Because the business plan pitch deck that I will be putting together in order to raise money will include only what the investor makes.
Okay. Good to
Very
be
good question. Very good question. Thank you for that. So in the second option here, we have the same movie. Yes, Mark?
Yeah, I was wondering if you have a investor that wants to do 100% equity, does your non-recoupable finances go into profits if you get tax credits, music licensing? Does that go into profits?
That it goes all to the waterfall. Yes.
It does. Okay. Thank
Yes.
you.
So whoever gives you 100% of the money will get everything, plus half your movie. Probably more. No bueno. Don't do that. Okay? So if they want to give you 100%, if someone gives you $10 million, you tell them, thank you very much. I'm going to make 3 movies with that, not just one. Your risk is diversified. We all make more money. Thank you. That's what that means. So take the money, but put it in at least 3 movies. So let's, yeah, Raul.
Sorry, a quick question regarding the
Yeah.
balance to the producers. So is it at one point customary that the writer or the there could be some other people also in that equity share. Am I correct?
They share in the profits. Yes. You can give a writer, let's say you have a writer who gave you a script for very low number. The rights are very, very feasible and they were very, generous. You can give them profit participation.
I see.
So I have given writers up to 5% of profits.
But then when you take the project as a producer, you organize this plan as it is, and then you keep as a producer the remainder equity that is
Yes.
left in the project.
You keep the profits that are then, because at profit level, everyone gets paid at the same time, right?
Sure.
So because it's driven by what the net revenues are, everyone gets paid whatever their percentage is by the collection agent. The collection agent does all this. They do it. You don't even have to do anything. You get your money sent by the collection agent. Everyone gets paid by the collection agent. So you are not touching someone else's revenues because you don't need to. The collection agent pays the writer, they pay the talent, they pay everyone. And then they pay you also.
And do you also have like a producer fee before that?
Yes, you do. Yes, you do have a producer fee in the budget. The
Some of
producer
them.
fees in the budget, when we talk about, I think it's next week when we talk about budgets and those kind of things, you can have, the producer pool can have up to 15% of the budget in fees. I would not suggest you go that high, but that's what is seen and done.
Thank you.
That's for the pool. That's for you and all the other buggers that are in the producing pool. Not the line producer, but the co-producer, the executive producer, the other executive producer, the co-executive producer, the producer, the other producer. No, the list goes on. Yeah, make sure you don't have many producers. I hate when someone sends me projects that has a shitload of producers, excuse my French, because I have to pay for all these people. So what do? I fire them all. I don't need you. You're not giving me money, not interesting to me. So there. So same for you. Don't put producers in there because they take your money away. Unless they do something that makes sense, like me. I always do things that make sense. So in option 2, we have the same movie, but it's not projected to really make the same money. So it makes only 65% international, and it has only 25% pre-sale. So if I look at that finance plan, the major difference you're going to see here from what you've seen before is that less pre-sales, only 2.5 million, and the bank loan is therefore only 3.520. So the bank loan is a lot less. We had over $4 million earlier, right? The incentive we now have to increase because we don't have that much bank loan, and we don't want to pay equity because we're going to pay 20% on the equity. So what do? We're going to find somewhere, either an incentive region, or we're going to find some other money that we don't have to pay back to increase the 20% to 25% here in the non-recoupable finance source. I also have increased the brand integration by 5%. So I'm getting 10% from two sources in order to make up for the 65% that should be 75% in international projections. So that's what I did here. So the equity is therefore 30% because I balanced it out with two non-recoupable finance sources in order for my equity to stay approximately the same. So therefore, here we go. The ROI is also the same, 21%, because I balanced it. The numbers are slightly different, but the ROI is still 21% because the balance I applied. Does that make sense? Yeah, good. This one, number 3. I think it's number 3. Why does it say 2? 2, 1. Oh, that's the recoupment. Hold on. No, it should be saying 3. Jeanette, wake up, wake up. Wake up. This is number 3. Okay, so here's number 3, option 3. Now we're really in sucky territory. Hold on, did I miss something? Hold on a second. Oh, I think I'm missing a slide. Am I missing a slide? I think this goes somewhere here. Number 3 should be here. Missing a slide. Sorry about that. This is 3. Yes, this is 3. This is 2. Okay, got it. I was jumping too fast. So number 3, we only have 50% projected in international sales. Really sucky, really bad. We have to figure out what do we do with this situation. 50% projected, 30% pre-sales. So what do? We're increasing the incentive and we're increasing brand integration in this situation. So, and in essence, I'm doing the same thing. But theoretically, I could also here, because the pre-sale 25%, I could also slightly increase the equity if I wanted to. But in this case, I wanted to give you balancing options that would lead me to what is a similar ROI. So if you want to stick with the ROI that you're suggesting to your investors that are looking for more than 20%, your solution is always going to be non-recoupable finance sources in order to cover the projection. Because we're missing 25% up here, we're missing some money here. So we're balancing it by doing it, shooting in an incentive region that gives us 30% and increasing our branding to 15%. We could also have done something where we say, we're going to throw some music investment in there. We're going to throw some in-kind services in there. So we can loosen the weight on branding, for example, with other finance sources. Long story short, the non-recoupable finance sources need to be included and increased whenever you do this, which is why here we're still at 20% with the ROI, because that's what we did. I did do, and I'm just going to do this one thing with you because it's already 1:30. I want you to do, where's my option 4? Hold on a second. Oh, I want you to do this one. Oh, I just did this one. Okay, I gave you the answer. Forget what I just said. I need more coffee. All right. So what I wanted you to do was actually option 4 yourself, which I just now did for you. So forget that. But I'm going to come up with something for next week where I'm going to have you do some other things in order to find out what another option could look like. Because what I want you to know is I want you to be able to balance the finance sources in a way that is not where you're dealing with a situation that is not ideal. I want you to know what that looks like so you know what kind of options you have. And maybe what we'll do is we'll Well, I'll let you come up with the options. I'll think of something because I just gave you the answer to the very thing I wanted to do with you. So the one thing I want to do with you right now is a movie, an actual movie that I made up for us to look at. And this movie I made up and said it's taken in London. It's a $12 million movie. And I wanted to just look at a few things here that are different than what you've seen before. I'm going to point you to 75% is the same, 35% for the rest is the same. But I want you to see that the pre-sales we are getting, even though we're getting 35% in pre-sales, the bank is going to discount them heavily. The bank is saying to us, I'm only giving you 50% on these pre-sales because they're not great. We don't really value them as much. And this is something that you will deal with. The other thing you will deal with is you're going to have two different interest rates. You're going to deal with one interest rate for the pre-sale loan and another interest rate for the gap loan. And that is very often the case. In this case, we're going to have 9% for the pre-sales, 12% for the interest rates for the gap loan. Then we're going to put a junior lender in here for this finance plan with a premium because I want you to see what that looks like. And I'm going to do an incentive. And then with the incentive, I'm going to do what they do. They're not just going to charge a fee of 15%. They're also going to charge us a legal fee of $25,000. And they're going to charge us an executive producer fee of $50,000 because that's what they do. So sometimes you're going to find it. So I want that to be in our finance plan. We have a music investment here of $120,000. So we're going to include this in this one. And we're going to have some branding of 10% of the budget, and we're paying the advertising agency 15%. So the equity will pay the balance. For the recoupment, I want you to just know that you're paying the collection agent 1%, which you already know. You're paying the sales agent, which we already know. This time they're getting 16%, so they're getting a little more. The cast is getting 30% profits, and then the rest goes to you and to the investor. So here's what this movie looks like. We're doing it step by step. Here's the first plan, the valuation. The first thing you do with any movie, you put a valuation on paper. What does the valuation look like? 75% of the budget comes from international, 35% comes from the US. We're getting 13.2 million as a valuation. That's the first thing we do on any movie. This is what this looks like. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to put our senior loan together. That's the next thing you're going to do. And you're going to do that in your finance plan based on what you think will happen. You might not have this big of a discount, but you might have some discount. And I think for the finance plans that you will be working on, you should always work on a slight discount, like, 20%. So that's an 80% payout on the pre-sales. So the pre-sales were originally 4.2 million. But the bank says, I'm going to discount them at 50%. So they're only valuing them at 2.1. And then, of course, they're going to deduct the 20% that we already received. We received 20% of 4.2 million. That is 840,000. And they're deducting that. So they're saying, I'm only giving you 1,260,000 on these pre-sales of 4.2 million. That really sucks. So then they're going to say, we're going to charge you 9% interest on this. So you're left with 1,146,600. So that's where we are on the pre-sale loan. And then they're going to look at the gap loan. The gap loan arrives just the same way we arrive at it by using the unsold rights. Here they're charging us a larger interest of 12%. They're also charging us, and you're going to find this to be the case, a loan fee and a legal fee. That will also be charged. In this case, it's $75,000. You will find that when the bank will give you a term sheet. So all in all, we have a bank loan that we have to pay back 3,660,000, but what we're getting is 3,183,600. So that's all we're getting from the bank. It's not that much. It's not even a third of the budget, roughly. So then, but it could be very well. So the junior loan that we have, they're giving us 10% of the budget. 10% of 12 million is 1.2 million. So that's fine. But they're charging us a legal fee of 25,000 and they're charging us an executive producer fee of 125. This exact deal I had to make. So that's why I'm giving it to you here, because I know this is what it costs. It's disgusting. Anyway, so then we're going into production incentive here. The production incentive was 25% of the budget. We're paying the 15%. We already know this pain. But now we have to pay the legal fee of 25,000 and they want an executive producer fee of 50,000. Happens. So I'm giving it to you as well. The sponsorship is 10% here. The agency gets 15%. So we get that one. We have the music investment in here. So our equity is about 27.6% with all these different things. It's not so bad. So then we're looking at the recoupment again. You already know you're going to have to deduct your down payment because you already received this from the distribution revenues you made. You made 13,200,000. The down payment you received was 840,000. Therefore, you're ending up with 12,360,000. Yes, Janessa?
Can you go back to the
This one?
with the agency fee? Because I thought
Agency fee.
correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah,
Because
go
I
ahead.
thought that like you reach out to the sponsorship yourself.
Yeah.
Not understanding that where the agency fee is coming from.
Yes, very good question. I'm glad you're asking this. So let's say you reach out to the brand yourself and the brand says, I'm going to give you 1,200,000, but I want you to work with my agency that I always work with to get the details of this deal done, to get my product inside, to get it done the proper way, to follow my messaging and do all the things that my agency does for me. That can happen. That is why you pay them.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, great question. Thank you for that. So this part we understand, right? So everyone is clear here. And so the last thing we do here is we're going to pay everyone. We're going to pay the collection agent. We received in the collection account 12,360,000. The collection agent gets 123,600 because they get 1% of that. The sales agent get their sales agency fee of not 1,009,080 because it's of the distribution revenues that were generated. They get their distribution expenses, 1% of distribution revenues generated. We pay our senior loan back, including all the interest and costs. We're paying the junior loan plus the premium of 10% of the investment for the junior lender. We're paying the equity plus 20% of the investment. So we're ending up with net revenues of 1,177,20. And then we're paying our cost and director profits. We're paying the equity investor 50% of what they gave to us. And we make 675,978. So for homework, I'm not going to make you do this right now. I would like you to do the same case study, but change the budget to 15 million and send it to me in an email. And that way I can let you go a little earlier because I'm losing my voice. And I think we've done a lot today, so I think it's perfectly fine. Most people, by the way, take breaks. I don't take breaks, as you've noticed. Do we have any questions? Yes, Carol.
Sorry, I know it's been a long night already.
No, it's all good.
Can you go back to the previous slide?
This one?
Yeah, and
Okay.
can you please clarify the 30% profit participation for cast and direct?
Yes, I can clarify that with you. I kind of made that up.
Oh,
So basically, I decided that I'm giving my cast and my director profit participation for this assumption, for this film. It's not based on anything other than me saying I'm giving profits to my cast because they gave me a great deal. I didn't have to pay their entire salary. And I'm giving my director profits because I didn't have to pay his normal salary. You give profits to cast, director, or in general people when they give you a really good deal in reducing their salary and their cost for you.
okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah, good
Yeah.
question. So our answer is I made it up. So any other questions? Yes, Maureen, go.
Yes, two questions actually. First is, so I didn't understand. So for this particular thing, we're not taking into account the US distribution, right?
Oh no, it's in here. Look, let me go back. Wait, let me show you. Let me go back.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
Hold
I
on a
see it.
second. Here, US was 4.2 million, 35% of the budget, as I many times do. So we have
Oh, okay.
distribution revenues, yes.
And I just didn't understand can you go to the pre-sale loan, please?
Yes.
Yeah, it just Oh, okay, no, it's just because I was based on the file that you sent us before the class, and it wasn't the same thing, so it's fine, no, I understand it, thank you.
No, I want you to know, look, the pre-sales that we made in general, we want to make, you know, the 35% pre-sales. So we made 35% of the budget, 35% of 12 million is 4.2 million. We made that in pre-sales, but the bank doesn't want to give us the full amount. They're looking
Yeah.
at pre-sale distribution agreements and decide they're not as valuable. These distributors are not as bankable. We don't have good experience with some of these distributors who you did these pre-sales with. And because of that, we, the bank, will discount them and only give you half of them, which is 2.1 million instead of 4.2 million as a loan.
Yeah, thank you, I understand, thank you.
Great, perfect. Okay, so here's your homework. Do that so you don't have to do it now. And then I will see you next week, same place. Au revoir.
Bye.
Bye, thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
That's very nice.
Bye.
You guys are great. Great questions as always. I love it. Have a great week.
Can we grab these slides?
You
Will they-
too.
I'm going to send them to you as always.
Great, thank you.
No worries. Yes, you'll get them. Have a good evening, you guys. Bye.
Bye bye.